Hello and welcome to the channel. As always, like the video, and if you enjoyed the story, leave a comment on if you would want more. This fanfiction was not created by me, but in the description there is a link to the fanfic so you can show your support to the creator and read along. Without any more delay, let's dive into the story.
There is never a good day to go to war, Sarutobi mused, but today is as good as any. His aged eyes darted to the heavens, taking in the massive expanse of blue dotted with fluffy white clouds for as far as he could see. It was gorgeous over Konoha on the day of the third exam, not too hot, not too cold, with a light breeze that just ruffled his formal, white robes. A fine day to die, he concluded, not satisfied, but content in his musings. One didn't make it to his advanced age, especially as a shinobi of his caliber, without contemplating death from time to time. Sarutobi had only truly feared for his life 3 times. The first had been when he had volunteered to sacrifice himself to Kumogakure's Kinkaku squad for the safety of his team. The second had been near the close of the Second Great War, when he took to the battlefield and dueled Ryotenbun no Inoki to a standstill that turned the tide of war in Konoha's favor. The third had been the moment he felt the malevolent chakra of the Kyubi no Kitsune materialize on October the 10th almost 13 years previous. And each time, that fear for his life had been tempered by a grim determination to see his course through to the very end. As the Sandaime Hokage sat in his high-backed chair overlooking the grand fire arena, with the cold, twisted chakra of his wayward student polluting his senses from nearby, he realized that today was no different. He would see his course through as he always did, for better or worse. In the meantime, however, he had a job to do. Raising one finger, he nodded his head in the direction of Shiranui Ganma, the new proctor in the wake of Gekko Hayate's death. Gray eyes shifted to the contestants' balcony, where he knew the Sunigakure Jonin Baki was standing. ANBU had determined that he was the most likely suspect in the special Jonin's murder. He would be forced to pay his due for that slight before the day was over, Sarutobi suspected. Down below, Ganma had introduced the genin. And now, ladies and gentlemen, honored dignitaries, our first match of the day will be Uzumaki Naruto of Konoha versus Sabaka no Gaara of Suna. If the other genin would please make their way up to the contestants' balcony. Sarutobi was pleased that no outright boos had greeted Naruto upon his introduction. The boy would likely never be all that popular with Konoha's general populace, but he had the respect of the shinobi corps. His exploits in both wave and river country had reached the ears of many. It was difficult for even his most vehement of detractors in the corps to doubt his results, especially after he had single-handedly ensured the survival of his own genin team, another genin team, and an injured jonin. His competence couldn't be questioned, and it was time for the questions surrounding his loyalty to be put to bed. Today, regardless of the impending invasion, would be Naruto's coming-out party. Danzo's assignment would see to that. The 2 other members of Team 10 had lingered with Naruto after Ganma had dismissed them. Inazuka Kiba clasped the blonde on his right shoulder, giving him a sharp nod. Yamanaka Ino wrapped her arms around his shoulders and whispered something in his ear before kissing him on the cheek. Naruto offered the 2 of them a smile. "Get out of here, guys. I got this," Sarutobi heard the blonde say. "Uzumaki is quite confident," Hokage Orochimaru noted. His voice was a perfect imitation of the Yondaime Kazekage's, were it not for the distinctive feel of his chakra, muted though it was for reasons unknown, one that Sarutobi knew so well after years of teaching the man personally and that could never fully be masked. The Hokage likely would have been fooled. "I'm afraid that confidence is misplaced." The Sandaime smiled in spite of himself. "You're very sure of your son, Kazekage. Gaara has never lost a battle. And since his promotion to genin neither has Naruto," Sarutobi countered. "Not even to you, student. He is full of surprises." A chuckle escaped Orochimaru's mouth. To his credit it sounded nothing like his own. "Undoubtedly. We will see who is the better soon enough." "So we shall." In the arena, Gaara was grinning maniacally. "Mother will be pleased to finally taste your blood, Uzumaki Naruto. She has been impatient." Naruto, who had been in the middle of a light warm-up, paused. "I'm sorry to hear that," he replied, confusion clear. He, along with the rest of the genin, had been witness to Sabaka no Gaara's particular brand of insanity in the preliminaries, but it was unsettling to experience firsthand. And is mother impatient a lot? The manic grin widened. Only for the blood of the strongest. I will kill you, Uzumaki Naruto, and it will truly validate my existence. Not if I kill you first. The blonde tightened the black strap of his headband, letting the strands fall to his mid-back. He absently zipped up the front of his flak vest, never taking his eyes off Gaara. The red-headed Jinchuriki had nothing more to say, it seemed, only smiling his unsettling smile. Ganma, seeing that the posturing had come to an end, stepped forward. This match is the same format as the preliminary rounds. Killing is permitted, but the match ends the moment I say so. Any disregard for that will be met with immediate disqualification. Understood? The special Jonin was looking exclusively at Gaara for the duration of his speech. The redhead didn't spare him a glance. Understood, Proctor, Naruto said, speaking for both Jinchurikis. Ganma gave the blonde a considering look. He had been informed of Naruto's assignment, and nodded once. Stepping back, he said around his Fukimibari, in that case, let the match begin. To the untrained eye, Naruto was a blur of motion the second the words had left the proctor's mouth, but Saratobi's sharp gaze caught every detail. The blonde leapt back with his hands in a cross-shaped seal. An explosion of smoke signaled the arrival of a Kage Bunshin that was already in motion. A wind-sheathed kunai aimed between Gaara's eyes left the clone's hand in less time than it took to blink. It traveled the yards between the Jinchurikis at a speed faster than Saratobi had thought. Naruto was capable of, but the Tsunade automated defense had already acted. Gaara stood with his arms folded over his chest, a bored look on his face as a wave of sand rose to meet the kunai in midair. The bored look abruptly changed to wide-eyed as Naruto's knife, encased in wind, punched through the defense in an explosion of sand. The redhead, caught unawares, only had time to let his hands drop to his sides as the clone substituted with the kunai, using the slingshot effect of the kawarimi to burst through the sand and inside Gaara's guard. A heavy haymaker connected with the underside of the boy's jaw, lifting the Tsunade off his feet and sending him sprawling in the dirt with his sand chasing after him impotently. From the Kage box, Sarutobi allowed himself a smile. That maneuver would have immediately landed Naruto a promotion were it not already a foregone conclusion. It was well thought out and executed to perfection, leaving the real blonde out of harm's way. Lethal force would be better placed, but I suppose that armor would have rendered it moot. He snuck a glance toward his former student to see his eyes glittering with an unidentifiable emotion. The clone, who had immediately resubstituted with the thrown kunai to avoid the rush of sand, palmed two more knives and sheathed them in wind. Darting forward, he hurled them at Gaara, who had regained his bearings and was snarling his displeasure, eyes wild. An angry swipe of the redhead's arm sent a burst of sand that smacked one of the kunai to the ground but missed the second. Sarutobi's ears keyed in on the familiar roar of Naruto's hien a moment before the clone replaced itself with the remaining kunai. Seal-less kawarimi. You've been working hard, Naruto-kun, he mused as the replication deflected a wave of sand with a thick slice of wind from its left knuckle knife. Not that I would expect anything different. Pressing its advantage, the clone stepped forward and stabbed with its right knife, a spear of wind exploding from the tip aimed at Gaara's neck. And used to actively having to dodge, the Tsunade barely avoided the spear, awkwardly shuffling his body with a moment to spare, but stumbled. Naruto's clone capitalized quickly, closing the small gap between the combatants in one jump. A punch was barely redirected by the floundering redhead, and the clone used the sloppy parry to knock the demon container's arms upward before pivoting and driving its twin knives into Gaara's exposed chest. The extended wind chakra exploded out of the Genin's back in twin bursts of sand, not blood, and the clone didn't have time to react as Gaara's body dissolved into a mass of sand that quickly encased it. The doppelganger was crushed an instant later, and the remaining sand fell to the arena floor. Behind it all stood the real Gaara, grinning his manic grin and staring straight at a grimacing Naruto. From his vantage point in the Kage box, Sarutobi relaxed back into his chair, thoughts of war and death suspended. How will you handle this, Naruto-kun? Naruto had never truly fought an equal before. Sasuke was the closest to it he had trained with, but their spars were just that, spars. Since his graduation, Naruto's missions had seen him pitted against either those he outclassed or those who utterly outclassed him. Being on even footing in so many ways, resiliency being the major one, was unsettling. Then there was Gaara's insanity. "Is that your best, Uzumaki?" the redhead shrieked, his eyes bulging. From his spot across the arena from Gaara, Naruto could clearly make out his fellow demon container's face. He didn't like what he saw. Where in Sasuke's eyes, and even his own when he was being honest with himself, the spark of insanity was just a spark, Sabaka no Gaara's was a raging inferno. Malevolence that would have made seasoned Jonin paws shone through clear as day, and there was nothing else. No rationality. No restraint. It was kill, kill, kill. Nope, that's not good at all. What is this guy? Naruto wondered, his palms sweating slightly as his heartbeat picked up. His opening salvo had been executed to perfection and, while he hadn't expected to kill the Tsunagenin, he had expected the boy to be fazed by it. There was no wariness in his eyes, no tensing of his body. "He actually thinks I'm not a threat," the blonde realized. Without prompting, Gaara's mission history popped into Naruto's head, courtesy of Kabuto all those weeks ago. He's never been touched before. Naruto had known about the automated defense, he had seen it stymie Lee in the preliminaries, and it had been a major source of his anxiety before Jiraiya had taken him under his wing. Subconsciously, the trepidation at going toe-to-toe with an equal, if insane opponent faded to a familiar steely determination. Nervous energy was channeled as he began to bounce lightly on the balls of his feet. Jiraiya had trained him for nearly a month to fight his counterpart. He had the tools, and he would execute. He wasn't about to let his new sensei down. There was a small part of Naruto, somewhere within the depths of his mind, that pitted his insane counterpart. It was the part that felt an inkling of kinship with his fellow Jinchuriki, the part that knew intimately just how hard Gaara's life must have been. The rest, however, looked at the redhead with nothing but disgust. He looked at Gaara and saw what he might have been had his childhood been different in some unidentifiable way. He saw what could have been if he had allowed himself to hate and rage as much as he had wanted to when a villager spit at him or discreetly tripped him in the street. He had turned his hatred into mostly harmless pranks, and later he had channeled his rage into his training. Sabaka no Gaara was no shinobi. He was a rabid dog that needed to be put down. "Sabaka no Gaara is the container of the Ichibi no Tanuki, your mission is to eliminate him." Danzo's order echoed through Naruto's mind. With pleasure, the blonde thought with relish, his focus sharpening to a dispassionate, calculating edge. "Even with my speed and substitution I won't be able to get in a good enough hit with the Rasengan to put him down. Gotta bypass the sand." "Not even close," the whiskered genin finally called back. Rolling his shoulders, the blonde took a steadying breath and felt himself relax. Unbidden, a grin that matched Gaara's split his lips, and what it lacked in insanity it made up in pure malice. "My best is gonna kill you." "You think you can kill me?" Gaara shrieked. "My own father cannot kill me." The redhead cackled, a high-pitched screech, and Naruto shivered as a chill crept down his spine. "No, Uzumaki Naruto. You cannot kill me, but you will validate my existence." The Tsunagenin slammed both his palms to the ground and a massive application of chakra sent a wave of pure sand summoned from the ether hurtling towards Naruto. Almost unaware of his own actions, his body acting purely on instinct and awed in spite of himself at the massive attack, Naruto formed a cross-shaped seal. A Kage Bunshin exploded into life as the original leapt backwards on chakra-enhanced legs. Landing crouched 10 yards back from his clone, Naruto watched as the doppelganger flew through hand seals. A charged futon, Daitapa burst from the clone's throat that plowed a clear path through the ocean of sand. Drawing its knuckle knives, the Kage Bunshin sent a torrent of wind chakra down them before taking off at a sprint into the newly created path. Naruto himself watched his clone's progress for a moment with satisfaction. Seeing the monstrous wave of sand bearing down on him even as his clone cut a swath through it, he grimaced. "This is gonna fucking hurt," he muttered. Palming a kunai, he encased it in wind chakra and hurled it skyward with all the force he could muster. Blue eyes shifted to the flood of sand and narrowed as he steeled himself. Years of practice told him exactly when the knife hit the apex of its flight, and suddenly he was airborne, sharp focus and a small application of chakra replacing himself with his thrown kunai. The leftover chakra from his replacement was sucked in and slammed back into his coils as he hovered above the arena. Shit, that hurts, he thought as he gritted his teeth. Even with the QB healing him, he could only execute that maneuver a few times before he all but fried his chakra coils. With the threat of the invasion looming, that wasn't something he was willing to risk. Blinking to clear his eyes of tears that had formed, he surveyed the battlefield from above. His clone had successfully engaged Gaara. Great sweeping gusts of wind from the knuckle knives blasted sand away from the doppelganger almost as soon as the Suna Genin had directed them. The clone, through a series of acrobatics and redirection, was slowly but surely making its way towards its enemy. Naruto's mind took in the situation in the blink of an eye. Focus settled over him where exhilaration had been before. He gripped his right wrist as he began his descent. Blue eyes narrowed in concentration, and Naruto gritted his teeth as he channeled a ridiculous amount of chakra in the shape of a sphere. It spun around and around his outstretched palm before a grunt heralded the roar of swirling, self-sustaining, compressed chakra. Here we go. Chakra control working in overdrive, Naruto subtly directed the path of his fall as his clone, far below, leapt backwards and sped through seals. A tightly compressed build of wind burst from the clone's lips and careened through the air towards Gaara. The redhead smirked maliciously as his automated defense rushed to block the bullet, and wasn't disappointed. The wind crashed upon the sand like water on rock, sending the grains flying through the air as the defense was dispersed. Gaara opened his mouth to taunt the clone but was cut off as the real Naruto, falling with the aid of both gravity and chakra, pounded him wordlessly into the ground like an angel from on high. The Yandane's signature jutsu drove the unsuspecting Suna Genin into the arena floor and ground him down. An explosion of wind, dust, and rock burst from the newly formed crater, causing Naruto to blink reflexively as he let the spiraling sphere of chakra go to work. A determined snarl crossed the blonde's face, unseen by the crowd, as he felt the ball pulverize, rip, and tear its way through Gaara's flesh. 5 long seconds later, he let the jutsu dissipate and stood over Gaara. The redhead was shattered, his left arm and right leg both at awkward angles that left no room for doubt as to their brokenness. Spiral burn marks from Naruto's chakra covered the boy where the Rasengan had impacted, eating through cloth and flesh alike. Heavy bruising accompanied the burns, indicating massive internal bleeding caused by the rupturing of Gaara's internal organs as the Rasengan had spun them round and round like a whirlwind. Sand was everywhere in the crater, remnants, no doubt, from the Jinchuriki's sand armor that had given Lee fits in the preliminaries. Nonetheless, the A-ranked ninjutsu had eaten through it like nothing. What a deadly ninjutsu, no one could survive that, Naruto thought, noting his counterpart's lack of breathing. He shook out his slightly singed hand. Mission accomplished. Distantly, the blonde demon container could hear the roar of the audience's approval over the sound of his own heartbeat and labored breathing. Glancing upward from his position in the 5-foot-deep crater, he could see that the crowd was on its feet and roaring at the display he had just put on. And, by the looks of it, it was a positive roar. Unbidden, the ghost of a smile crossed Naruto's face as the warm feeling of acceptance washed over him. For all their hatred, animosity, and insults, no one in Konoha, shinobi or civilian, was disrespecting him now. A singular bark of laughter escaped him and he vaulted himself up and out of the crater to the sound of thunderous applause. His eyes rose to the Kage box, and the warm feeling in his chest turned into pride as the Hokage gave him a single nod. The proctor strode over to him, grabbed his wrist, and lifted it into the air triumphantly. Ladies and gentlemen, your winner, Uzumaki Naruto-Gunma was cut off abruptly as a loud cough from the crater drew his attention. Both his and Naruto's heads whipped around in abject disbelief. Oh, no fucking way. Naruto whispered. He wasn't breathing. There's no way he survived that. Ignoring the growing confusion of the crowd, unsure why the winner hadn't been fully declared, he hastily palmed a kunai and leapt to the edge of the crater. Gaara laid where he had left him, eyes closed, broken and bleeding, but his chest was clearly moving up and down. He had been knocked out cold. Before Naruto could fathom the impossibility of the Suna Genin's survival, not to mention his next course of action given his orders, a single, foul pulse of chakra emanated from the downed shinobi that sent Naruto reeling backwards. Gaara's eyes snapped open, but his eyes were no longer his own. Naruto could only watch with mounting horror as the now yellow-eyed Gaara rose like a puppet on strings, purple chakra emanating from his tenketsu cloaking him in a haze of malevolence. A heaviness that Naruto was oh so familiar with from his own encounters with the Kyuubi's foul chakra descended upon him a moment later, and the blonde recoiled instinctively, fighting a wave of nausea and abject terror. Before Naruto had time to move to end the now-possessed genin's life for good, a cloaked figure blurred into his periphery. Reflexes honed by Jiraiya's training saved his life by making him duck a palm strike that was aimed at his throat. His attacker wasted no time, moving like the wind with hands that were glowing faintly with green chakra. The blonde stumbled backwards 3 steps and dove to his left, out of the way of yet another strike and away from the crater. Rolling into a crouch, Naruto unsheathed his knuckle knives and stared wide-eyed at his attacker. The cloaked figure stood at the edge of the crater, seemingly unaffected by the growing surge of demonic chakra at his back, garbed in a charcoal battle cloak. His face was covered by the mask of one of Konoha's ANBU. "Ha! Do be careful, Naruto-kun," the enemy said, his voice distantly familiar to the Jinchuriki. "The Shikaku was set free the moment young Gaara here loses consciousness." The man said nothing else as he disappeared in a haze of flame. Naruto and the stunned proctor had no time to contemplate the infiltrator's words before the residual sand that had been scattered about the arena suddenly rushed into the crater and began to coalesce, and an inhuman, unearthly howl split the air in and around Konoha. "I'm free!" // One blink and the slightest flex of his chakra dispelled the feathers falling lazily from the sky. One blink more told him that his students were still under the influence of the illusion but weren't in danger of being killed at that moment. A third blink told him the rest that he needed to know about his current predicament. There was a biju forming in the arena, and invaders were quickly moving to eliminate any still sleeping Konoha shinobi in the massive crowd. The faintest swell of nervousness settled in the pit of his stomach. "You've prepared for this. What happens, happens. You have a mission, Tenzo, pull yourself together." In the moment he had taken to gather himself, Ino had shaken off the genjutsu and pushed herself to her feet. "Sensei," she muttered, clearly confused. A twinge of annoyance at being delayed further was repressed as he faced his student. "Konoha is under siege from Suna and Oto. Wake Kiba and proceed to the academy for further orders. Take any Konoha genin you find with you." The complicated set of emotions that crossed the blonde's face would have been comical had the situation not been so serious. She finally settled on something approaching dumbstruck, which was understandable given the information he had dumped on her. He had no time for that, however. Now! A single burst of concentrated killing intent shattered her stupefied silence and the blonde scrambled to check on her still incapacitated teammate. Bringing his analytical gaze back to the arena, Tenzo put them out of his mind. They were as well trained as any genin. Whatever would happen to them was out of his control, he had far more pressing matters to attend to. The bijou was rapidly gaining cohesiveness, sand that hadn't previously been in the arena materializing from nothingness as malevolent chakra called it to bear. Naruto stood next to the similarly stunned proctor, for the first time in Tenzo's memory looking truly lost and out of his depth. He supposed it was natural. The boy had been trained to fight a Jinchuriki, not a bijou. Tenzo had been positioned in case the mad Suna genin had proven too much for his blonde counterpart and released the demon of his own free will. No one had known that the beast would be unchained the moment Gaara lost consciousness. Pushing useless thoughts from his mind, Tenzo leapt from his perch on the balcony and powered toward his student. His hands rapidly formed seals that he had drilled to near excess almost 13 years before. "Okageshiki Jiju Injutsu, Kakuan Nitten Suishu," he bellowed. Kanji carved from chakra etched itself into his palm as water and earth shaped to his will. 10 pillars exploded from the depths of the arena around the crater where the Shikaku formed, metal spike protruding from their length that immediately began to absorb the poisonous chakra like leeches on flesh. He landed in a crouch next to Naruto, palm outstretched and sweat beading on his brow. "Sensei!" Naruto shouted, both shocked and relieved. "What are you dash? Cover my flanks." Tenzo bit out, directing it both at his student and the stun special Jonin. The technique had been designed by the Shodai in conjunction with other Mokutan techniques that were far beyond his meager, bastardized talents. It required all his concentration to maintain the attack without the supplemental justice, not to mention the added time. Naruto, to his credit, didn't question the order. The blonde, his eyes bleeding from clear blue to deep purple, bared his teeth in acquiescence and turned his back to Tenzo's left side, searching for threats. To the Jonin's right, the proctor did the same. "Nu!" In the crater, the bijou screamed its fury at being halted in its formation. "You will not end my existence," it howled, but it was powerless to stop its own malevolent essence from being sucked into the pillars wisp by wisp. The spikes were like vacuums, slowly but surely sucking the purple, demonic chakra into the pillars where it dissipated to nothingness. Sand that had been gathering into a monstrous shape now fell back down to earth with nothing to guide it. Sweat dripping into his eyes, mind solely on maintaining the technique, Tenzo felt, more than sought his personal space invaded by the ANBU who had disrupted Naruto just minutes before. The figure blurred into his periphery to his right and the proctor, to his credit, reacted before the masked man had even truly appeared. Steel glinted in the afternoon sun as the proctor made a lightning-quick stab with a kunai that the masked man twisted away from gracefully. The ANBU snatched the attacking appendage, hands glowing a faint green, and used it as leverage to pivot inside the proctor's guard and jab 2 fingers to the man's chest. The proctor, one Shirianui Ganma, stumbled back a single step, clutching a hand to his chest in reflex. He didn't make it a second before he collapsed to the ground bonelessly, his eyes vacant in death. Tenzo's eyes widened at the lethality of the masked man, preparing to abort his jutsu to save the mission and his life. The false ANBU spun to attack but leapt to the right as Tenzo felt a blast of wind pass him and cleave a 4-foot-deep trench where the masked man had just stood. Thanking whatever deities that existed, he refocused on his jutsu with a desperation born of true fear as his most capable student guarded his back. "Come now, Naruto-kun. Leave this business to the adults," he heard the masked enemy say, voice dripping with condescension. "Truly, this is no place for genin, even one as talented as you." His student didn't respond with words, only with an animalistic scream as his elemental chakra roared louder than ever. Tenzo's hair was buffeted and his feet felt the earth shake as aftershocks of Naruto's chakra exploded outward, doubtlessly seeking to drive the enemy further from him. His focus now solely on his task, Tenzo watched impatiently as his jutsu sapped enough demonic chakra for the bijou to lose some of its rapidly gained form. It shrank, screaming impotently all the while, as great purple wisps left its mass in greater number as the technique gathered steam. Sand that had once been rushing to the center was now freely carried by the aftershocks of Naruto's futon jutsus, turning the center of the arena into a massive sandstorm that Tenzo squinted his eyes against. The Jonin's His concentration evaporated as he righted himself in midair, a spike of pure frustration shattering his composure as his jutsu collapsed. He landed deftly on the balls of his feet, glaring at the Suna Jonin who had interrupted his mission so close to completion. Tenzo's mind characterized the man's attire, standard except for the curtain-like mask that covered half the man's face, and identified him as Baki. The Jinchuriki's sensei was one of Suna's elite, not to be taken lightly. Every second passing, however, was time for the bijou to form. That was unacceptable, elite Jonin in his way or not. His hands blurred through speeds too fast for the untrained eye to catch and he reared back, gathering chakra in his mouth, before spitting a bullet of condensed water at his enemy. Baki gave no ground, blurring through seals of his own and releasing a bullet of wind aimed at his head that shattered his teppadama in midair. Tenzo allowed it to pass harmlessly over his head as he completed another set of seals and slammed his palms to the earth. Doton, Doriokatsu. The ground fractured as he poured his chakra into it, cracking at his enemy's feet before rising and splitting entirely with a resounding crack. Baki leapt to his right to avoid the chasm and Tenzo was on him in an instant. The former ANBU chucked a kunai at near point-blank range that the Suna Jonin avoided with a simple tilt of his head. The distraction served its purpose as Tenzo pivoted inside Baki's guard, kunai in hand aimed at his enemy's neck. The Suna Jonin, off balance, was forced to block with his forearm. Blood exploded as weapon met target and Baki snarled. The Jonin used his damaged arm to grab Tenzo's wrist in a vice grip before pulling the Konohanin forward and thrusting out with his right hand. The Kaze no Yaiba formed within it, struck out like a lance and pierced the Konoha Jonin at point-blank range, an explosion of wood the only result. Baki leapt back to make space as the wooden shards reformed into kunai that quickly made to skewer him. Tenzo scowled as he watched his Mokuton kunai miss their target, quickly forming more hand seals and spitting a stream of sticky water towards the now slowly advancing enemy. He was better than the Suna Jonin, but then the man's mission wasn't to kill him, only to stall him long enough for the Shikaku to form and obliterate the village. And with each passing moment he succeeded. Narrowing his eyes in concentration, he pushed his mutated chakra to his left arm and felt the appendage lose cohesiveness before hardening into spear-tipped branches. They lanced out with a grunt of exertion, hurtling through the air faster than thrown kunai. Baki halted his advance, dancing out of the way of the first volley whilst forming rapid hand seals. A column of wind exploded from the Jonin's mouth, tearing and shredding through the wooden projectiles with impunity. Taking advantage of the Sunanin's momentary lack of vision, Tenzo took a page from his student's playbook and kawarimi'd himself with one of his earlier spears. He was on the move almost before the substitution finished, powering himself in a chakra-enhanced sprint towards his enemy. He palmed two kunai as he avoided Baki's desperate defensive swipe by sweeping the man's legs from under him. Brown Eyes watched his enemy's face contort in horror as his balance was usurped and his guard bypassed. Cold satisfaction filled him as he stabbed out with his kunai to end the life of the treacherous Suna Jonin. He had no time to register the slightest rustle of cloth behind him. He had no time to comprehend his own peril as he was lightly tapped on the back of his neck. He had no time to react as he felt something separate in his spine. He had no time to hear the anguished yell, "Yamato-sensei," from a fallen Naruto across the arena, for the world had already faded to black. // Anticipation had changed to apprehension, to exhilaration, to confusion, to terror. Then to rage. And now finally to helplessness. He hadn't felt this way since Itachi's Sharingan had held him captive all those years ago, when he had instinctively known that he was at someone else's mercy, and there was nothing he could do about it. Naruto was alone in the arena, a muted ache seeming to emanate from everywhere in his body at once, watching seemingly from a distance as his world crashed down around him. Foul, malevolent chakra assaulted his senses as the Shikaka gained coherence once more, but he felt no fear. The ANBU imposter helped his Suna comrade to his feet with a hand, but he felt no rage. The prone form of his murdered sensei lay where he had been cut down, but he felt no sadness. Unidentifiable shinobi and kunoichi clashed in the stands, but the majority of the fighting had been taken outside the arena. Once sleeping civilian spectators mobbed the exits in a mad rush to escape the frenzied slaughter, many getting caught in the crossfire. Daimyos cowered in their seats as their shinobi or samurai escorts shakily held their ground against the disorder. Atop the stands, a purple barrier had been erected around the Kage skybox, a mini forest within it obscuring all occupants from view. Sabaka no Gara is the container of the Ichibi no Tanuki. He is the linchpin in the enemy's plan. Your mission is to eliminate him. Danzo's orders rattled around his psyche for a moment as the blonde took stock of the chaos that had enveloped his home, Jiraiya's teaching asserting itself even now. There was no elite team coming to the rescue. There was no cavalry hidden away in the bowels of the arena. His comrades were dealing with their own enemies. It was just him. He had his mission. And you are failing. Some distant part of his mind screamed. Gingerly pushing himself to his feet, Naruto rushed chakra to his left leg, which had been deadened by a glancing brush of the masked enemy's hands. His lip curled as he heard the Shikako scream, "I'm finally out. And there are so many people I want to kill right now." That was his assignment. There was no thought about logistics. The how didn't matter. He'd find a way. Or die trying, his mind supplied. From the looks of things, I have another minute before it's fully formed. But I still got these fuckers to deal with, he grunted, turning his gaze towards the masked man and Suna Jonin. The Jonin surveyed his student's transformation with a grimace, moving back a leap as more and more sand coalesced into a demonic hole. The imposter was staring right at him, however, the unseeing eyes of the ANBU mask seemingly piercing Naruto to his core. Naruto blared right back. The man had been the cause of death for at least 3 Konoha shinobi. The Tsunade Jonin had aided him in the killing of his sensei. And both stood in the way of his mission. His mind was calm amidst the storm, his purpose was clear, and his rage burned like ice. This wasn't about either of the 2 treacherous men opposite him, this was about the safety of his home. A snarl split Naruto's lips as he felt the Kyuubi's chakra stir in his gut, still tightly bound by his will until he chose to unleash it. He's already killed 2 Jonin. I'll only get 1 shot at this. The ANBU imposter tensed as Naruto holstered his knives, catching the attention of his Suna comrade. Mauve eyes narrowed as the blonde prepared to unleash hell as the Shikaku formed to his right. Without warning, the world kicked into high gear. Chakra rushed to his left palm where it spun, merging into a tightly spun Rasengan in the blink of an eye before Naruto exploded forward, leaving a shower of dust and cracked earth in his wake. The blonde disappeared from sight, blurring in to kill the imposter faster than the eye could track. And the deadly hammer blow was casually halted by the masked man firmly grabbing Naruto's wrist, stopping his momentum dead. The man rocked back on his heels for an instant, phenomenal chakra control holding him in place against the sheer kinetic force of the attack. I told you, Naruto-kun, the man said over the whirring of the Rasengan, a smirk clear in his voice. This is no place for genin. The blonde let loose a smirk of his own, sparing half a second's thought before violently retracting his left arm. The masked man was good, but the split second when he was off balance was all the time Naruto needed to pivot and unchain the demonic chakra that had been begging for release in a devastating punch. The fist connected with the imposter's chest in a detonation of malicious red chakra, and the man had no time to blink before he was blasted through the arena wall behind him like a bullet. The demonic chakra bubbled and burst forth from Naruto's tenketsu with a searing heat that pierced him to the bone as he moved to press his advantage. A quick turn squared him up against the stunned Tsunade Jonin, and he lanced out with a spear of pure chakra before the man had time to attack. The sand ninja tried to spin out of the way at the last moment but couldn't completely avoid Naruto's rapid offensive. Coming out of his rotation, grimacing in agony as now exposed skin on his upper chest sizzled where his flak jacket had melted, the man tucked and rolled to his left to avoid being decapitated by Naruto's attempted clothesline. A kunai found its way to his good hand in time to hastily parry a slash of the blonde's claws. Inhuman chakra ignited Naruto's muscles as the blonde slashed at the defensive Jonin where he clashed with the kunai once, twice, 3 times before swiping it out of the man's hand with a growl. Sliding inside the Tsunanin's guard and jabbing with his right claw, he dug into the already damaged flesh of Baki's upper left chest as the man let loose a shriek of pain. A quick twitch of the man's reflexes prevented him from skewering the heart, but Naruto didn't waste time lamenting his missed opportunity. Even as the corrosive chakra ate away at his enemy's flesh, Naruto reversed his momentum and pulled the Tsunanin into a grapple before torquing his body and slamming the Jonin into the arena floor with a crash and explosion of smoke. Kawarimi, Naruto's clouded mind supplied, but he was already in motion, rolling out of the way of a futon, Rankuden and squaring himself up for another lethal offensive. The Jonin blurred through hand seals as fast as his injury would allow and swung his head back and forth with 2 fingers pinched around his lips. 5 blades of wind erupted from the man's mouth and screamed towards Naruto, who was forced to strafe to his right to avoid being cleaved to pieces. The blonde moved to press forward on the offensive but was halted as 3 spheres of wind crashed to the arena floor, enhanced reflexes powering him in a tight backwards leap away from the danger. Red, slitted eyes narrowed in frustration as the Jonin launched a massive, compressed sphere of futon chakra before he had even set his feet. Struggling to maintain his coherence against the red haze that had settled over his mind, Naruto acted on instinct alone. Pulling the poisonous chakra of his prisoner to his throat, the now feral blonde reared back and screamed. The burning chakra escaped Naruto's mouth in a wave that crashed against the inclement wind sphere and exploded in a swell of foul, humid air that quickly blanketed the arena as a whole, pushing the enemy Jonin back a step. The Tsunanin's lip curled in response to the counter, teeth grinding against the pain of his wounds, before chancing a tiny glance over his shoulder, where the Shikaku had nearly completed its formation. Naruto, sensing the opportunity, burst forward, striking with his right arm causing a clawed arm of red, bubbling chakra to lance out to crush his enemy. He hit nothing but air, however, as the Jonin turned back around and formed a single seal with his good hand, disappearing in a blur of movement. Naruto skidded to a stop, snarling as he whipped his head back and forth, extending his senses to locate his enemy. He found nothing, his awareness stretched thin, only able to feel the heavy malevolence of the rapidly growing bijou some 50 yards in front of him. A distant part of his mind reasoned that it was the Kyuubi's own cloak of chakra that kept him from suffocating under the inhuman amount of killing intent being spilled by the Ichibi. He glanced up, and up, and up to finally regard the cackling visage of the bijou. The monstrosity was nearly 20 stories tall, far taller than any building in Konoha. A crash nearly made the adrenaline, Yukai-fueled Naruto jump, the beast's tail casually leveling the arena wall behind it. "I see you, little Kyuubi," the demon roared, its massive yellow pupils focused on Naruto even from hundreds of feet in the air. A single swipe of its tail leveled the wall to its left, where some Konoha shinobi had begun firing jutsu from. Neither the bijou nor Naruto spared the destruction a glance. "You could not end my container's existence, and you will not end mine." Without warning, the demon's body inflated for a moment before a massive futon bullet mixed with purple, demonic chakra burst from the Ichibi's mouth. It was only the Kyuubi's chakra coursing through his coils that gave Naruto the speed to power his body back against and up the arena wall 10 meters behind him. As it was, the massive explosion of futon blades that erupted when the bullet impacted still managed to slice through the Kyuubi's cloak and cut Naruto almost to the bone. The blonde hissed as steam rose from the rents in his body, the Kyuubi's chakra knitting the wounds back together before blood could even drip from them. From atop the arena wall, Naruto stared upward with narrowed eyes as the resulting dust and debris from the attack settled slowly. A single tail of boiling, crimson chakra waved slowly behind him of its own accord. Inwardly, Naruto warred. True to its word, the Kyuubi had not tried to overwhelm his mind when he had called the foul chakra from his prisoner. But the deadly essence was so imbued with the beast's hatred that the blonde felt as if his skull was being cloven in two just trying to maintain his equilibrium. Compromised as his mental state was, however, he didn't have time to wrestle his own emotions. He only had time to act. Instinct blurred with cognition as Naruto powered himself back down to the arena floor. The half-plan formed in his mind carried him towards the Ichibi's legs even as his hands sped through seals. Naruto's ears popped as the air behind him compressed for an instant before a massively overpowered futon, Daitapa roared its fury and crashed into the sandy bijou's left leg. Sand exploded from the appendage and the demon roared as half of its leg was blown clean off, causing it to plummet towards the ruined arena wall. Naruto wasted no time, shooting forward faster than ever before. He screamed as a blood-red Rasengan took shape in his hand and turned himself into a missile by launching himself directly at the falling bijou's face. He didn't make it more than 15 meters before a sandy appendage rose to swat him like a fly. Muscles aided by his prisoner, Naruto twisted his body in midair and brought the spiraling sphere to meet the attack. The Rasengan detonated with the force of a small bomb, blowing the hand off the Ichibi and the backlash hurling Naruto through the ruined wall and into the village proper. He hit the ground and bounced once before rolling to a stop against a building and pushed himself to his feet once more, the cloak taking the brunt of the concussive force. Crimson eyes widened in dismay as sand rapidly reformed the hand and leg he had blown off with his techniques, the massive demon screaming its fury all the while. "You cannot end me, little Kyuubi." Naruto was airborne before he knew he had to move, an instinctual chakra-enhanced leap carrying him up and over the top of 2 blocks of buildings to his right. It wasn't a moment too soon as 3 monstrous futon, Rankuden stole his breath as they passed and obliterated the entire city block he had propped himself up against. The first emotion to pierce the haze of his cloak was shock as the blonde watched buildings, and their screaming occupants, crushed, shredded, and torn asunder in a massive shower of debris. Desperation battled with Naruto's rage anew as he watched the senseless destruction of his home. This was a power he had never dreamt of seeing before. This was a power he had never been trained to counter. This was a power he could not stop. But it didn't matter. His home was under siege. He had to stop it. Reaching deeper within the well of power granted by his prisoner, a crimson corona of power exploded around Naruto as he drew more demonic chakra than ever before. Teeth sharpened to fangs, claws lengthened, whisker marks deepened further, and a second tail of boiling chakra rose from the pit of Naruto's hatred to join the first. Deep within his psyche, the fox's menacing laughter was deafening. Naruto sprinted forward, bounding over buildings and leaving a cracked earth and an afterimage in his wake as he directed his foul power with a single-minded focus, destroy the Ichibi. He was upon the beast in a second. Instinct directing his intent, Naruto thrust his hands forward as twin arms of pure malevolent chakra extended from shoulders and ripped massive hunks of sand from the Tanuki's torso. Ignoring the Biju's shriek of fury, the hands grabbed hold of the Ichibi and pulled, launching Naruto like a missile at its face once more. Baring his fangs in concentration, the feral blonde called as much of the Kyuubi's power to bear as he could and struck out in a monstrous, Yukai-augmented haymaker that blasted a third of the demon's face off as he rocketed past. Heavy sand showered him as he descended, and he hit the ground with enough speed to shatter a boulder. A 5-foot radial crater erupted from where his feet impacted the ground, now in the center of the grand fire arena once more. He whipped around to attack once more but stopped in his tracks as a single wave of the Ichibi's tail called up a massive wave of sand that was higher than the arena walls. Disbelief didn't even cross his mind, unbelievable as the battle had already proven to be, as he directed the malevolent cloak to his will once more. Instead of twin arms, this time there was only a single wave as the twin tails swaying behind Naruto combined. With a snarl of intent, Naruto sent the thin wave crashing into the massive wall of sand just as reached him. The crimson chakra sliced a neat, meter-wide gap that the feral blonde stepped through almost casually, his hands ablur in preparation for his next offensive. The air behind him compressed once more as his futon, Daitapa built and Naruto jerked his head to the right as his senses alerted him to a new presence next to him. A white-cloaked shinobi suddenly stood shoulder to shoulder with him and flew through seals that, even with his enhanced eyes, Naruto could barely track. The formation ended in less than a second, the shinobi holding the tiger seal just as the building pressure from Naruto's futon jutsu released. Crimson eyes widened in shock as the cloaked shinobi wordlessly reared back, expelled a massive burst of pure fire directly into the path of his jutsu. Before Naruto could blink, the flames had expanded into the maw of a dragon that roared with the wrath of 1,000 explosions. The searing heat of the technique was merely a tickle to the blonde, given his chakra cloak, but he could feel the new charge in the air as the Daitapa fanned the flames and erupted into a massive firestorm headed directly for the Ichibi. The Tanuki shrieked as the combination jutsu impacted its side with enough concussive force to batter it into the remaining arena wall. White-hot flames melted sand in an instant, fusing it together and forming glass that shattered with a crack that could be heard across the entire village. Even as great shards began to cascade to the ground, Naruto turned red eyes to meet his unexpected comrade suspiciously. The cloaked shinobi, wearing a cat mask, wasted no time. Uzumaki, command has determined that the most successful course of attack will be a strike to the Ichibi's head, killing the container within, the man said in a rushed voice that somehow lacked inflection. Naruto strained to hear him over the cacophony of laughter and pounding in his skull. Further damage to village infrastructure has been deemed unacceptable. You have been drafted to aid my squad in eliminating this threat. Do you understand? The last phrase wasn't a question, and Naruto, even in his warring mind state, didn't treat it as one. Understood, he growled, not out of displeasure but because he could do nothing else with the Kyuubi's chakra running rampant through his system. Follow, the ANBU ordered, leaping away towards the stands as a second figure cloaked in white dropped to the arena floor and sent a compressed blade of wind toward the rapidly reforming Ichibi's legs. Naruto complied a moment later, appearing beside the cat-masked man in the now deserted stands. The only ones left were corpses. On my signal, my squad and I will engage the Biju in a coordinated attack that will halt its movement long enough for you to attack the target, the man stated, voice calm amidst the destruction. Position yourself on the roof above us. It will give you the best vantage point to attack from. I will signal you when it is your time. Naruto nodded curtly, his mind moving a mile a minute to process the surprising turn the battle had taken. He turned and dashed for the exit, crimson chakra still enveloping him, when the ANBU's voice stopped him once more. Uzumaki. The circular eyes of the mask bored into Naruto. We only have one chance at this. Make it count. This time, the blonde didn't even bother with a nod before vaulting himself up and flipping backwards to the roof of the stands. Higher now than even he had been on top of the arena wall, the Shikako still dominated Naruto's vision. Even at nearly 10 stories high, the raging demon loomed higher. Instinct had led him to attacking the head earlier, but he had only barely reached it once before. But, some distant part of him reasoned, his new teammates would likely take care of that minor detail. Ignoring the sound of his heart pounding like a drum in his ears, the Kyuubi's continued maniacal laughter resonating through his entire body, and the Ichibi's screams of rage, Naruto brought his hands together in front of his face. Baring his teeth, he swirled the corrosive chakra coursing through his coils into a tight sphere that forced his clenched hands apart with a grunt. But he didn't stop there. He had one shot to end this madness, and he was going to make it count. Naruto ground his teeth as he pushed his focus and control to the limit, feeding the already Kyuubi-fueled Rasengan even more chakra until the spiraling sphere slowly expanded to the size of his head. Panting, rivulets of sweat beating at his forehead before evaporating under the heat of the Ninetales chakra, Naruto held the monstrous red Rasengan with both hands. "Ready," he grunted, just as an unknown signal compelled Cat's ANBU team into action on the ground. A white-cloaked, bird-masked ANBU on the arena floor rushed forward, great sides of wind bursting from his hands that were as wide as the Ichibi's legs. The blades sliced clean through the sand and the Tanuki howled in pain and fury. The ANBU wasn't finished, however, and leapt up and latched onto the disintegrating left leg with chakra-enhanced legs, sprinting up the demon's body almost faster than Naruto's shocked eyes could track. Spears of sand formed to skewer the bird-masked man along the beast's leg, but the ANBU darted around them with dexterity and grace. Reaching the demon's hip in less than 2 full seconds, the ANBU flashed through 4 seals and slammed his hand against the sand and vaulting himself backwards and away from yet another spear. Dozens of explosive tags rushed forth from where the ANBU had touched the Ichibi, rapidly encircling the beast's left leg even as it swatted at the airborne man. The tags detonated in a colossal explosion of fire that consumed the Bija's leg and halted its offensive. With a shriek, the Shikaku tumbled, sand dispersing everywhere as it crushed the last remaining arena wall. "I'll slaughter you all," it screamed as it impacted the ground with an almighty crash. Whatever else it might have said was muted as a greenish-brown dome of clay shaped like the face of a boar appeared from nowhere and encased it whole. "It won't hold for long," said the cat-masked ANBU, who had somehow appeared next to Naruto on the roof unnoticed. "My Justu will bind it when it breaks free. Move on my signal." Naruto and the ANBU waited 2 full seconds before a scream of "Iniko" tore through the air and the clay dome began to shudder. "Now," the ANBU ordered, speeding through hand seals, but Naruto was already sprinting for the edge. He launched himself off the roof just as the Shikaku shattered its temporary prison with a roar that shook the very foundations of the village. For stone pillars burst from the earth just as the dome exploded outward, dozens of bolts of lightning arcing from the stone and striking the Ichibi instantly, immobilizing it as the booming clap of thunder stole away Naruto's hearing. The blonde flew faster than ever before, the Kyuubi's cloak pushing him to speeds he'd never dreamt of reaching. Eyes narrowed in intense concentration, Naruto hit his apex and began to fall, his will directing his chakra which carried him on a crash course for the Ichibi's head. He let his will guide him as he fell, instinct having taken over completely, faster and faster as blue lightning and sand encompassed his field of vision. He didn't notice when the pillars cut off their assault. He only noticed sand and massive, malevolent yellow eyes as he drove his Rasengan into the Shikaku's head like an angel of divine wrath, screaming his feral battle cry for the whole village to hear. Crimson eyes squinted against the immediate sandstorm, barely glimpsing a shock of red hair amongst the grains before the spiraling sphere detonated with the force of 100 explosive tags, and he saw only white. Naruto's eyes went blind, his ears bled, and he screamed his throat raw as the explosion consumed him. Teeth shattered and skin melted and fused back together as the instantaneous heat pierced the Kyuubi's cloak before the blonde was hurled away like a speeding bullet. Absently, as if from a very great distance, Naruto felt himself crash to the ground and crater. Agonizing heat enshrouded him as the Kyuubi's chakra wasted no time in knitting rent flesh back together, regrowing bone, and remaking hair that had been reduced to ash. Naruto paid no heed as he used his last ounce of willpower to force his eyes open, fighting rapidly encroaching darkness. At the edges of his vision, he could barely make out the sight of a desert's worth of sand crashing back down to earth from what seemed like a mile away. Heh, he exhaled in what could have been a laugh. Paying it, or anything else, no mind, Naruto let darkness claim him. He had never been one for funerals, he hadn't been to one in decades. Somewhere along the way in his life he had gone to one too many, buried one friend more than he could stand, and avoided every other he was supposed to be at like the plague ever since. It wasn't about respect. Everyone he had ever fought beside knew just how much he cared for his comrades. It was about his own happiness. No shinobi he had ever fought beside would care if he showed up at their funeral, so he didn't. Life was too short to be spent mourning those who had lost theirs. He had had that figured out by the start of the Third War. Was it selfish? Probably. Did he care? Not a chance. He hadn't attended the service for his most prized student years ago, though he had considered it, so it would come as no surprise that he didn't show up at his sensei's either. Instead, he gathered up his newest student and whisked him away to find the old man's replacement. It was a journey filled with adventure, intrigue, and, most importantly, debauchery, or at least that's what he'd told Naruto when he'd kicked his door in that morning. Sensei. You still haven't told me who we're looking for, Naruto whined from just behind him as they powered through the treetops. Or, where we're going? He had been known to leave out potentially key details on more than one occasion, but in his defense Naruto hadn't put up much of a fight when told they were leaving this morning. The boy was as big a fan of funerals as he was, it seemed. We're going to find a princess. Jiraiya exclaimed, a shit-eating grin on his face as he turned to behold his student's stupefied expression. He weren't expecting that one, were ya, kid? If you didn't want to tell me you coulda just said, geez, the blonde mumbled. Jiraiya laughed outright at the irritated expression on the boy's face. He was too easy to tease. The Sannin turned himself fully to face his student, now skipping backwards through the trees at pace. Who says I'm fucking with you, kid? He returned easily, expertly hiding the smallest of hitches in his voice as his newest student morphed into a ghost. Close-cropped blonde hair lengthened, forming bangs that framed a sharpened jawline. Narrower blue eyes glimmered in annoyance as whisker marks faded to nothingness, replaced with unblemished tan skin. Namake's Minato stared back at him for a lost moment in time before Jiraiya blinked and the ghost of his past faded back into the ether. Despite having his mother's face, Naruto was damn near the spitting image of his father with his new green flak vest. The Sannin quickly turned back around to face forward. Oh, I dunno, sensei, common sense, the blonde piped sarcastically. Fair point, Jiraiya conceded, still shaken. Bah! You shouldn't doubt me, my very young apprentice. I have wisdom far beyond your meager comprehension, for I am Jiraiya. The one true sage of Mount Mayaboku. A man so gallant that no woman has ever refused him. A man so powerful that his enemies quake in fear at the mere mention of his name, Naruto recited, voice flat. His eyes held a glimmer of amusement, however, and Jiraiya felt himself grin. Am I on track here, sensei? Heh, so he does listen. Ever since their first impromptu lesson in the hot springs, the blonde's awareness of the world around him had slowly but surely become something resembling acceptable. He was far from proficient, but he wasn't quite as liable to be killed because of lack of attention to detail. Which meant that Jiraiya could actually focus on developing the boy as a shinobi. He hadn't been this excited in years, damn near 13 years in fact. 13 years of traveling the world over, searching for whispers of his traitorous teammate. 13 years of poor leads and dead ends. 13 years of dedicated service to his village, looking for threats and neutralizing them before they truly materialized. 13 years of trying to forget about the loss of a man who was supposed to change the world, and 13 years of wondering how he was ever going to explain everything to his godson. 13 years of trying to put into words how Sarutobi's request, not order, to stay out of Naruto's early life, in the wake of Minato's death, had been a good enough reason to stay away. He had no explanation, none that he had dreamed up had ever satisfied his conscience, and he knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that they would satisfy Naruto. So he leapt when Sarutobi had finally put him in charge of the boy's development. Over a decade of traipsing about every corner of the continent suddenly became worth it. He had uncovered information about an organization that was hellbent on capturing the Biju, their hosts be damned, and knew that Naruto would soon be hunted. And not just by the Akatsuki. Not even he had predicted that Naruto would ever get caught up in Orochimaru's twisted machinations. Which only heightened the pressure he was under. Naruto needed to be well prepared to fight the coming darkness, and the task had fallen to Jiraiya. Perhaps 13 years was too conservative of an estimate. He hadn't been this excited since the end of the Second Great War. He had had two students prodigiously talented in the shinobi arts, either of whom he had been certain would change the world as the child of prophecy. Minato and Nagato, two boys from different nations that he had been blessed to bestow even a fraction of his knowledge upon, legends in the making who had the potential to shape the world into a place worth living in. And then they were dead. Nagato and his friends slaughtered by Hanzo sometime near the end of the Third War. Minato cursed to an eternity in the Shinigami's stomach, stopping the Kyuubi's rampage. Naruto was the only one left, and where before Jiraiya had felt all hope for the prophecy lost, he now saw a glimmer of possibility. At 13, the boy was blessed with his mother's vitality and strength of chakra. As an Uzumaki, he would have had large reserves even without the Kyuubi being sealed into him at birth, but with it? Jiraiya had sensed, truly felt, Naruto's chakra 3 times since he had known the boy. Once in the Forest of Death when he had unleashed his rage upon the outmatched Oto Genin. Once when he had completed the second stage of training to master the Rasengan. Once when he had let loose a fraction of the Kyuubi's power in his fight against Gaara. Massive didn't truly begin to describe what Jiraiya had felt. Oceans of chakra had greeted his senses. The Kyuubi's otherworldly reserves had bled through the seal for over a decade, leaving the blonde teenager with so much that Jiraiya doubted that he'd ever in his life experienced true exhaustion. Minato had been a genius among geniuses. Orochimaru had been the same. Nagato's legendary eyes had given him an insight to the workings of chakra that Jiraiya had never dreamed of. At 13, all had been better shinobi than Naruto was currently. Jiraiya himself had been as well. Naruto's skill set wasn't developed. He wasn't unbelievably fast. He had no naturally inherent grasp of ninjutsu. He was unrefined, his potential untapped, and yet had still tackled a fully manifested Biju, for the most part, on his own. The Sannin contained a shudder as he glanced once more at the blonde keeping pace with him. No, excited didn't really begin to cover what Jiraiya felt about being able to teach Naruto. / People looked at him differently now. They had always looked at him, whether they wanted to or not. At first with disdain and thinly veiled rage. Then with wariness. And finally with disdain once more. He wasn't used to awe. What were you expecting, idiot? His traitorous mind supplied. He had, after all, damn near fought a Biju on his own. It wasn't unreasonable that the general populace started seeing him in a different light, considering he played an integral part in defeating the greatest threat to Konoha proper since the First Great Shinobi War, with a little help from a friendly neighborhood ANBU squad, of course. The general populace didn't care about that part of the story. Hell, few enough shinobi cared that he had had help. He had beaten back the threat, scattering the Biju's chakra to the 4 corners of the continent when he obliterated Gaara. They didn't see the exhaustion that had kept him unconscious for over a day. They didn't see the tears that fell when he was told that the Sandaime had died in a last-ditch, failed effort to destroy Orochimaru. They lauded him as a hero where they had once scorned his very existence. Some were still wary, of course. 13 years of hatred could hardly come undone that easily, but the blonde had never been the recipient of so many well wishes in his young life. He wasn't used to awe, and he didn't like it. The irony? He was only a few short years removed from having wanted that kind of attention more than anything else in the world. Even Ino and Kiba looked at him differently, though they hid it well. There was a wonderment in their gaze even as they made fun of the villagers who damn near tripped over themselves thanking him. A wry hint in Kiba's voice as he made a joke about still being able to take him in a fight. A glint of pride in Ino's eyes as she pulled back from giving him a goodnight kiss. They were the hero's teammates now. With the villagers it had been a surprise and an annoyance at their hypocrisy, but altogether not unexpected. Ino and Kiba were his family. They weren't supposed to treat him like anything other than their teammate and friend, and a bit more, in Ino's case. While he supposed it wasn't nearly as heavy-handed as the villagers' turnabout, it still irked him. Worst of all, he couldn't really explain it to them. How did one explain that they hated almost everything to do with the fickle population he had lived among for his entire life? That their change in behavior, however slight, reminded him of the villagers he had come to hate. They had seen his anger, even gleaned a hint of understanding upon learning about the Kyuubi. But they had never lived it. They had no idea what it felt like to be regarded as nothing more than a manifestation of the villagers' worst nightmares. He wasn't a person. He was the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Nothing more, nothing less, and this latest rush of favor would evaporate just as quickly as the last when the time came. You are their pawn, a weapon forged in the heat of desperation to be used and discarded. Konohas to ignore for your service, and a scapegoat to be held up in times of strife. Perhaps the snake Sannin hadn't been entirely correct in his statement of Naruto's utility to Konoha, but he certainly appeared more right than wrong. The only two who didn't treat him differently were Sasuke and Jiraiya. The Uchiha had shown up in his hospital room sporting a new Chunin vest, apparently for outstanding service during the invasion. He had given him a quick once-over, sneered at his bedridden state, said, "TCH, find me when you're out of this place." Usual spot. No holding back this time, dead last, and left him to his recovery. And he would have, if only for a glimpse of normality in his whirlwind of a life, had his new sensei not burst in on the day of his release, thrown his own Chunin vest in his face, and unilaterally decided that they were going to find the old man's replacement. "Fuck debauchery," he groused, sweat pouring down his face and chest as he used every ounce of concentration he was capable of to remain invisible. Naturally, he was in an onsen. Jiraiya, true to form, wasn't about to let finding the next Hokage interfere with his research. The Sannin was sprawled next to Naruto in the baths, in a small town called Shakuba, calmly taking notes in between the occasional giggle. Of course, the legendary Nin was using his usual cloaking method, leaving him completely invisible to the numerous women scattered around the bath. As a matter of course, Jiraiya had decided to turn the relaxing afternoon into a training exercise. The Maisegekure no Jutsu was difficult enough to perform and maintain under normal circumstances. Using it while trying to avoid sharp bursts of Suetun chakra Jiraiya casually sent at him every few seconds was a bit more frustrating. I am gonna wring every ounce of knowledge out of this guy, Naruto thought, chakra control working in overdrive to maintain his cloaking as a jet of water clipped him underwater. And then I'm gonna fucking murder him with it. Preoccupied as his thoughts were, his focus slipped. The Gamasenin wasted no time and a jet of water, more powerful than the last, caught Naruto on his upper thigh. He clamped down on a squawk of pain as he felt his cloaking jutsu begin to fail. Tiger Borok's dogsnake, Naruto's chakra reached out and deftly replaced himself with a log that was conveniently placed outside the back wall of the onsen where he and Jiraiya had been lounging. The blonde exhaled hard as the Maisegekure no Jutsu faded completely, slapping the ground in frustration. "Fucking hell," he muttered, shaking his head and leaning it back against the bamboo wall of the hot springs. Maybe Yamato's insistence he work on his chakra control before the Chunin exam final, he contained a wince at the thought of his second dead sensei, had been better founded than he'd originally thought. Chakra control, fucking chakra control. It's what it all seemed to come down to these days. Too bad I've got a fucking demon in my system, Naruto thought derisively. Thanks for that one, Dad. He had raw power to throw around, and a lot of it. But raw power was useless unless he had the control to direct it. Not every enemy was as big a target as the Shikaku's head had been. Raw power had its uses. It had carried him through wave and river country, two situations where he'd likely have been killed otherwise. But it hadn't been enough to strike a killing blow against the treacherous Suna Jonin from the third exam, Baki, his mind supplied. It hadn't been enough to even touch the traitorous Anbu that had killed Yamato, his wind chakra, the most offensively oriented element, hadn't even touched the arrogant man. In the end it was his deception that had caught the man off guard, his power had merely been the blow landed. He didn't bother to entertain the idea that raw power would be enough to help him survive the Akatsuki, whenever they decided to make a move on him. Shaking his head at his circular musings, he formed a tiger seal and disappeared in an explosion of smoke. And reappeared in the men's changing area, where he was immediately greeted by his new sensei. "What took you so long, brat?" the Sannin asked, already changed and flipping casually through the pages of notes he had collected in the hot springs. Naruto blinked in surprise. Jiraiya always took his time before leaving the onsen if Naruto had been cast out first, for research purposes, of course. Thinking, Sensei. The white-haired man snorted. Didn't hurt yourself, did you? Naruto felt one of his eyes twitch. This guy. Skillfully ignoring his immature sensei, the blonde quickly changed into his standard attire, now complete with his brand spanking new Chunin vest, and led the way out of the onsen. Jiraiya swiftly overtook him, still flipping through his notes in earnest. Shakuba Town wasn't quite a city, but it was unlike any other place Naruto had been in his admittedly limited travels. It was a place designed entirely for the pleasure of those who were within its walls. Inns, restaurants, bars, and, most notably, brothels lined the main streets. It had a small casino that Naruto and Jiraiya had scoped out upon their arrival the day before, and the hot springs they had just left. Even though Jiraiya insisted that this was the first, entirely legitimate stop on the way to finding the Sandame's replacement, Naruto had his suspicions. Jiraiya sighed from in front of him, tucking his notes into a seemingly non-existent pocket of space. He turned to Naruto, eyes serious. Alright, kid, look, I'm no good at all this touchy-feely emotional crap you've had going on since we got here, but I'm gonna try anyway. What's eating you? The blonde started, but before he could even open his mouth and protest, Jiraiya had cut him off. And don't feed me some bullshit line about thinking. You can't bullshit a bullshitter, brat, I'm the best there is at what I do. Naruto glanced away, a frustrated sigh escaping his lips. Dunno where to start. Some say the begin. Yes, the fucking beginning, sensei, Naruto snapped, pointedly ignoring Jiraiya's self-satisfied smirk. I need to be stronger. The Sannin paused in the street and Naruto halted just behind him. Jiraiya pondered his statement for a long moment before. That's what you're going all angsty on me for, kid? He was going to kill him. Seriously, kiddo, you're 12. 13. Same shit. Jiraiya waved him off. My point stands. This isn't the type of shit you need to be worrying about right now. The older man sighed heavily. You're young. You'll get plenty strong in time. I don't have time, Naruto bit out, nearly spitting the words. The Chunin exams had shown him his limits in extensive detail. Nearly ineffective against the two treacherous shinobi in the arena, powerless at the whim of Orochimaru. Now, picture yourself standing alone, against an organization of my near equals. No, raw power wasn't going to be nearly enough. Jiraiya sent him a measuring look that the blonde returned with equal measure. The Sannin huffed, closing his eyes in apparent exasperation before focusing back on his student. Look, Naruto, I get where you're coming from, he said. You've seen a lot of strong shinobi these past few weeks, never mind the Shikaku. It's intimidating, it's mind-boggling, and it's scary seeing that kind of strength thrown around, he continued. But you can't let that change you. You can't let that glimpse of power alter how you live your life, it's not worth it. Trust me on that one. The Sannin trailed off, gazing outward and upward for a moment, seemingly lost in some memory or another. Naruto was silent as he watched his teacher. I remember one day, I wasn't much younger than you are now, me and the rest of my genin team were coming home from a mission and ran into an IWA kill squad. For elite jonin, went by the name of the Sentan Butai, they were pretty well known back in the day too, Jiraiya said. Wanted Sarutobi-sensei's head, of course. Well, the old man just told us students to stand back while he took care of business. He shook his head with a wry smile. Sensei made quick work of them, but 3 managed to survive the first few seconds of the fight. I just remember thinking that they were 3 tough-ass shinobi to be able to do that, real elite jonin. Jiraiya snapped back to the present in an instant, taking Naruto off guard with the sharpness of his gaze. None of the 3 of us were the same after that. We had seen Sensei show off before, but to dispatch 3 ranked shinobi without blinking an eye? It was unfathomable. We all wanted a slice of that cake, so we went out and got it. The Sannin sighed, rubbing his temple tiredly. I guess what I'm trying to say, Naruto, is that it's easy to fall into the trap of constantly chasing power. It's there for the taking, but it demands a sacrifice. Me and Tsunade? We sacrificed a lot, and we got a lot stronger for it. And Orochimaru? That day changed him more than any of us. And, well, you know how he turned out. He pinned Naruto with a searching gaze once more. I've seen a lot of shinobi go the way he did, kid. Good shinobi. Good men and women twisted by their need to get stronger. I've had to cut a few of them down myself. Naruto's stomach dropped to his feet. I don't want to see that happen to you too, kid, Jiraiya finished quietly, turning to resume their walk back to the inn. Naruto, shell-shocked, followed in his wake. I think I understand, sensei, the blonde ventured after a few moments of silence. His lack of time, however, remained. But you've still got my crazy ex-teammate interested in you, Jiraiya cut in. Never mind, others. The hairs on Naruto's arms stood up as a swooping sensation passed through his stomach. Could he mean others, sensei? He asked quietly. The large man sighed, and he had done a lot of that today, lips quirking into a mirthless smile as he looked at his student. It's all about power in the end. Ever since the time of the Rikudo Sennin, people have been obsessed with the Biju. That hasn't changed in centuries. There are always gonna be people trying to claim the power of the tailed beasts, and the Kyuubi especially. My old teammate is one of them, and he's far from the only one, Jiraiya said. He sighed once more. I'll get into them with you soon enough, Naruto. For now, just trust me, okay? He offered the silent Naruto a reassuring smile. I'm not about to let guys like that get their hands on you, and I'm a pretty good guy of watching your back. It was Naruto's turn to sigh. I just want to be able to take care of myself. I don't want you to have to watch my back, sensei. He nearly started as Jiraiya clapped a hand to his right shoulder and squeezed. Course you don't, kiddo. Gotta give it time, though. I'll have you whipped into something resembling a decent shinobi soon enough. Hell, you already don't suck nearly as much as you did a month ago. Naruto swatted at the hand on his shoulder good-naturedly, managing not to bristle at the casual insult to his skills. Sensei, with all due respect, please go fuck yourself. Ha! You should know by now, brat, there's always a willing woman waiting for me just around the corner. The blonde rolled his eyes, smiling in spite of himself. Sure there is, you perv. Super pervert to you. I told you not to sell me short, Jiraiya chastised seriously. And would you look at that, he whispered fiercely. Naruto followed his gaze and immediately felt his eyebrows shoot toward his hairline. A buxom brunette sashayed toward them from the front of one of the many pleasure houses they were passing. She wore a tight, strapless blue dress that left little to the imagination. Two gold bands that gleamed in the midday sun encircled her slim waist, accentuating soft curves. Black heels placed her a couple inches taller than Naruto, and the blonde felt his pulse begin to race. Deawamam, he thought, uncaring that he was staring at the stunning woman. The smallest upturn of full lips belied her awareness of the attention she was being paid. She surveyed the two of them for a moment before her eyes, as dark as her inky hair, settled on Jiraiya. A wink so quick Naruto wondered if he imagined it was tossed the Sanin's way. The blonde ruthlessly quashed a flare of envy for his teacher, and she turned slowly to walk toward the storefront she had come from. Ah, Naruto heard Jiraiya breathe at the invitation. Every woman has their own beauty, my very young apprentice. Some, of course, are easier to observe than others. Naruto sighed. Lucky bastard, he thought uncharitably, still staring at the retreating form of the woman. The room key, sensei? Head, you catch on quick, kiddo. Jiraiya tossed him the key and spared him a glance far sharper than the blonde had expected. Go work on your meditation back at the room. Focus on your awareness of the here and now. His face was relaxed, as befitted a man about to greatly enjoy his afternoon, but Naruto's eyes, slowly but surely learning to truly see, noticed a slight tension in his teacher's bearing. He exhaled, immediately on his guard. Yes, sensei. There's a good student, Jiraiya said, swiftly ruffling Naruto's hair before the boy could react. He strode off after the woman in blue, hastening to catch up to her. I'll be back before too long, kiddo, he tossed over his shoulder. A promise. Naruto nodded silently. He didn't know what had suddenly set Jiraiya on his guard, but he knew to be wary. Anything that would set the Sannin on edge was definitely worrisome. For now, just trust me, okay? Doesn't look like I have much of a choice, Naruto thought, Jiraiya's request from just minutes ago ringing in his ears. He formed a single sign and disappeared in Shunshin. // The door locked with the click of the tumbler. Naruto wasted no time creating 3 Kagebunshin. One immediately hinged into a chair next to the door that the second sat on. The third took a seat on the bed, legs crossed under it, and began to meditate. Naruto, the original, formed a tiger seal with his hands. Taking a deep breath, he pushed his chakra to the surface of his skin on the exhale. The feeling of eggs breaking broken over every inch of his skin was familiar now as the Misega cure took effect. Precautions taken, he plopped down against the wall facing the door of the small room, the window looking out into the street just above his head. Jiraiya had sensed something amiss back down on the street, which could mean a few different things. Someone knew about their search for the next Hokage and was looking to put a stop to it, or someone was after Jiraiya and Naruto was to wait at the room so as to not be caught in the crossfire. Not bloody likely with my luck, the blonde thought, his heart rate elevating in nervousness. Was Akatsuki finally making a move? He had always expected to be blitzed by whatever S-ranked monster would be sent after him. He had had nightmares about the scenario for years, nightmares of dead bodies of teammates and senseless destruction and his own inability to prevent it. He hadn't expected to be waiting for the assault, sitting in a hotel room while the clock ticked away in the corner, possibly spending the last moments of his life wondering when the other shoe would drop. Pull yourself together. Jiraiya isn't far away. He'll be able to handle this, Naruto comforted himself, all the while nearly snarling at his own helplessness. Unbidden, the Kyuubi's chakra began to stir in his gut and he clamped down on the impulse to let it explode outward. Whoever found him here, if they find me, would be getting a face full of Kyuubi as a welcome. And how fucking long have I been? 2 knocks at the door cut off his thought and Naruto's heart leapt to his throat. Seriously? He thought, thrown for a moment even as the clone closest to the door slowly rose to answer, a kunai behind his back. Ignoring the absurdity of Akatsuki potentially knocking on his door politely, Naruto willfully brought the Kyuubi's chakra into his system. S-ranked or not, if the person behind that door was an enemy, he was ready to unleash hell. The clone opened the door and every ounce of fortified strength was sucked right out of him as Uchiha Itachi's Sharingan stared over the head of the clone, through his cloaking jutsu, and into his eyes. Shit, he breathed, stunned and unmoving as he beheld the man who had, with his words, shaped the past 5 years of his life. A black cloak adorned with red clouds covered the man from the bottom of his chin to his knees. Hair the color of slate framed an angular face that had haunted Naruto's dreams since the night of the massacre. Hello, Naruto-kun, Itachi said pleasantly, his voice a smooth tenor that was somehow calming despite the perilous situation. I must ask you to come with me, please. They will hunt you, Uzumaki Naruto. The clan killer had neglected to mention that he would be the one doing the hunting. Naruto entertained the idea that Itachi didn't mean him any harm. He had warned him of a group of powerful criminals who wanted him dead years ago, after all. But then S-ranked criminals rarely meant good news, and Itachi had slaughtered his own clan that night. His criminal status wasn't in question. His sanity, on the other hand. The blonde didn't bother mincing words as he formed a hasty Rasengan and slammed it into the wall behind him. He propelled himself backwards and out into the town with a burst of chakra as his 3 clones rapidly converged on Itachi. A crackle of lightning and the phantom smell of ozone was the only warning he got from the memories of his destroyed clones before Itachi was in his face. So fast. Was all his mind had time to process as he barely got his arms raised in time to stop the Uchiha's punch from caving his chest in. The strike sent him rocketing toward the street below, and only a hasty roll prevented him from cratering. He found his feet quickly, hands forming the familiar cross-shaped seal. 3 clones burst into existence next to him with a pop, the first already speeding through hand seals. Rat tiger dog, a futon, Rankuden exploded out of the clone's mouth and hurtled toward the Uchiha. Itachi broke to his left, directly into the path of the second clone bearing down on him, knuckle knives roaring with wind chakra. The clone slashed out at the missing Nin's head, a 3-foot blade of pure chakra extending from the end of the knife. "You've grown, Naruto-kun," the rogue Uchiha complimented, ducking the blow with ease. Naruto winced as the memory of a straight kick to the chest greeted him upon the clone's demise. The blonde palmed 2 kunai and sheathed them in his wind chakra before hurling them at Itachi. The final clone gripped its wrist, and suddenly the sound of chakra grinding against chakra filled the town as a fully formed Rasengan sprang to life in its hand. A sealless Kawarimi was thwarted as the missing Nin knocked both kunai off course with twin throwing knives of his own. Recovering quickly, the clone blurred faster than Naruto's eyes could track in a shunshin. The speed ninjutsu proved useless, as Itachi reacted faster than Naruto thought possible. He smoothly redirected the Rasengan with the back of his left hand before stabbing the overextended clone in the neck with a kunai hidden in his right sleeve. "I am so fucked. My best friend was a man given the moniker of Sunshin no Shusui," Itachi stated placidly, his kunai disappearing back into his sleeve. "Your Shunshin, unfortunately, pales in comparison to his." The Uchiha disappeared and Naruto's eyes widened as he hopped over sliding kick, reflexes acting before his mind caught up to the speed of battle. Itachi stuck a hand to the ground with chakra, halted his momentum, and drove a kick into Naruto's exposed stomach that knocked the breath out of his lungs. "Your tactics are simplistic," Itachi critiqued, appearing above the airborne blonde. Naruto twisted in midair, snapping out a chakra-laden kick towards Itachi's torso. It crashed into the Uchiha's outstretched arm and halted. "Your attacks lack potency," the missing Nin said before slamming his fist into Naruto's face. The blonde hit the earth like a meteor, cratering in a 4-foot deep hole as cracks in the road expanded outward rapidly. Stars flashed in front of his eyes as his vision blinked in and out, the sky turning from blue to green to yellow to white and back to blue again as he lay dazed. Distantly, he recognized that he'd never been hit harder. Soft footfalls greeted his ears as Itachi came to stand at the edge of the crater he'd punched Naruto into. His cloak, unruffled from the conflict, rippled in the breeze. To Naruto's slowly readjusting eyes, the Uchiha looked almost disappointed. "Tales of your exploits have been spread far and wide, Naruto-kun. You have indeed grown strong since we last met," Itachi said. His voice was entirely calm, not a hint of strain at having so soundly beaten the blonde below him. "You are, however, underdeveloped in many ways. You cannot hope to stand against me as you are today. Your skill pales in comparison to my own when I was your age, even. I fear my words from so long ago have not been enough." Naruto blinked and suddenly found himself with his back against the wall of his hotel room once more. His clones were frozen, and Itachi had stepped around the one who had answered the door to face Naruto fully. "Genjutsu," the blonde breathed. He bit down on his lower lip harshly, drawing blood in an attempt to break the secondary illusion he was undoubtedly caught in. Blue eyes widened when nothing happened. "My Sharingan casts genjutsu that are not so easily broken," Itachi said. Naruto gingerly rose, unsure. "Why not just kill me?" he asked, his voice nearly a whisper. The Uchiha blinked. "You have undoubtedly surmised that I am a member of Akatsuki. However, I have no wish to kill you, Naruto-kun." Naruto balked, incredulous. "Then what the fuck was that?" He jabbed his thumb over his shoulder at the street where their one-sided fight had taken place. "A measure of your capacity," Itachi replied. "As I said, your exploits have become rather well known to those who are interested enough to listen. I wish to see what rumors were based in fact." The rogue Uchiha sighed almost imperceptibly. "I had hoped that my warning from years ago would have helped push you toward the strength you will need to fight the coming darkness. That you're not good enough was left implied." Naruto felt his mouth go dry and his stomach drop to his feet even as he bristled. "You don't fucking know me," he bit out. "You have no idea what I've done, the training I've put myself through." The words tasted like ash in his mouth even as he said them. He didn't give a flying fuck about Uchiha Itachi's disappointment. What that disappointment meant, however, was significantly more terror-inducing. I doubt neither your training nor your dedication. Merely your skill. Itachi regarded him impassively, Sharingan eyes seeing everything, perceiving everything about him. Naruto averted his gaze, clenching his fists at his side. I'm fucking nothing to this guy, he realized. You fight with precision, Itachi continued. Your chakra is both potent and expansive, but you do not know how to use it properly. Your potential is easy to see, but that is all it is. Not that I don't appreciate the lecture, but is there a point to this? Naruto asked, teeth bared in frustration. The Uchiha kept his gaze firmly rooted on the blonde. He paused for a moment, seemingly weighing his options before. I did not warn you of Madara and Akatsuki simply for your own benefit. Your survival, however, is integral. Madara recruited me to help him achieve his goal of world peace. Naruto felt his eyebrows shoot up of their own accord. Unfortunately, his idea of peace would benefit few other than himself. He must be stopped at all costs. He intends to collect the 9 Biju in order to resurrect the Jubi, the legendary Biju defeated by the Rikudo Sannin. With its power at his disposal, he will cast a massive genjutsu on the world in order to end all conflicts. Naruto blinked, opening and closing his mouth ineffectually as Itachi watched patiently from the center of the room. You're serious? The blonde finally managed to ask. At the Uchiha's raised eyebrow he shook himself. You do realize how ridiculous that sounds, right? Itachi's lips twitched, but he recovered from his bout of hilarity quickly. Regardless of how bizarre his plan might be, Naruto-kun, he is a powerful man with powerful forces working for him. Your life is very much in danger, as is the rest of the world. So go to the Kage. Naruto almost screamed, but stopped himself as his mind caught up to Itachi's situation. Missing Nin had no credibility with anyone, least of all with any of the Kage. The story he had just told Naruto was flatly ridiculous in all aspects. The only reason the blonde hadn't rejected it out of hand was because Madara's continued existence had been confirmed by the Kyuubi. Any of the 5 sitting Kage would laugh off the story before calling their ANBU or attacking Itachi themselves. The renegade Uchiha was short on potential allies, but the possibility forming in Naruto's mind was still far-fetched to the point of being ludicrous. So, what? You told me about Madara and Akatsuki years ago, and you're telling me more now. What do you want from me? Naruto asked, feeling his heart rate spike at the possibility of finally, learning why Itachi had singled him out 5 years ago. You are, no doubt, wondering if I placed my hopes for eliminating Madara in an 8-year-old boy, Itachi began. Your potential, both as the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki and in Uzumaki, is greater, even, than my own. I had hoped that my warning would help drive you, and that you would become a worthy ally against Madara. It seems my words were not enough, he finished, and Naruto felt the cold edge of failure pierce him. He didn't care about Itachi's hopes and expectations. But he did care about his life. Excuses could be made easily enough, but they could just as easily be dismissed. He was 13, but Itachi had been 13 when he'd murdered his clan. He was hampered by being in a team, but Itachi had been in a team and simply blew past them in the ranks. Every obstacle to strength that Naruto struggled to overcome in Konoha was one that Itachi had surmounted with ease. So what now? Naruto asked, voice quiet. His knuckles turned white as he clenched his fists at his sides. The renegade Uchiha cocked his head to the side, surveying the blonde. Are you so easily cowed by the idea of your own failure? He asked, a true note of confusion in his voice. I thought you would be more determined in the face of death, Naruto-kun. His knives were in his hands, wind chakra obliterating the room around him before he even processed his reaction. What the fuck do you want me to do, Itachi? He all but screamed. I've trained day and night for years. Taken every scroll I could get my hands on, taken every tip and lesson Konoha decided I could have. And you're gonna tell me I'm not determined enough? Itachi closed his eyes. Determination alone, however great yours may be, will not be enough. The Sharingan wielder's eyes snapped open, but the red pupil had changed. The fully developed 3-tomo had morphed into a three-pointed star that resembled a curved Fuma shuriken. Naruto started as the world faded to shades of red, black, and gray. He shivered as a terrible coldness seared him to the bone, his breathing increasing as terror took hold. The renegade Uchiha regarded him for a moment before turning his head to his right, gazing off into the distant plains of the world his eyes had created. Unbidden, Naruto followed his gaze and beheld legends reborn. Thick fingers of wood exploded up from the earth to wrap around a shadowy figure clad in red battle armor that danced around them with precognitive grace. A massive battle fan appeared from nowhere and was snapped out, expelling massive blades of wind that shredded the wood with ease. A second figure burst out of the rain of splinters and Naruto recognized him as Senju Hashirama just as he slammed a Zanbatsu into the shadowy figure's fan in an overhead smash. The Shodai's face was contorted in concentration, sweeping red lines of some sort of jutsu curving from under his eyes up into his Konoha forehead protector. Then that's... Naruto thought, snapping his gaze to the shadowy figure that repelled the sword strike with contemptuous ease before landing a snap kick to the Shodai's chest. Uchiha Madara, Itachi murmured, eyes rooted on his patriarch. The legend of old landed lightly and wove a hand seals before Naruto's mouth dropped open at the unfathomable amount of chakra that suddenly saturated the air. This is our enemy, Naruto-kun, the younger Uchiha stated, but Naruto was scarcely paying him any attention as a meteor rapidly descended from the atmosphere and obliterated the earth where the Shodai had stood. Even before the dust had truly begun to settle, a deafening groan split the air before crashing rock gave way to a titan of pure wood that pulled itself from the rubble. Hashirama stood calmly upon its head, arms crossed and eyes searching for his enemy. Madara wasted no time, and chakra that made Naruto's skin crawl filled the air once more. A gaping hole split the air between the two combatants, air even colder than that which had descended with the vision bringing the blonde to his knees. A roar of primal fury echoed from the Terran reality, foreshadowing killing intent that Naruto knew all too well. No, he breathed. That's not possible. He was proven wrong less than a second later as the Kyuubi ripped its way out of whatever hell Madara had opened, its fury shaking the very earth it stood upon. And just as suddenly as it had appeared, the vision receded. You now understand just what you are facing, Naruto-kun, Itachi said, somehow just as calm as ever despite the vision of immeasurable strength he had just conjured. Just who your enemy is. Naruto glanced up from where his eyes had settled on the floor. Incredulity didn't even begin to describe his state as he stared down his captor. You want me to fight that?" he whispered harshly. He was nothing next to Itachi's might. He might as well have been a newborn baby next to Madara's. As he is now, Uchiha Madara is but a shadow of what he once was, Itachi said. His mind is keen, his agents are numerous and powerful, and it is still beyond the limit of my abilities to kill him alone. He is vulnerable, but as you are you would be nothing but an insect to be swatted. You must do more, the missing Nin said sharply. Your determination, as it is now, is meaningless compared to Madara's strength. Become more than a shadow of the potential that you possess. Cut yourself free of the shackles that bind you, Uzumaki Naruto, and become strong. Itachi was nearly nose to nose with Naruto before the blonde could react. Cling to life as you've never done before. Naruto's eyes widened at the desperation that colored the Uchiha's tone as the Sharingan bored into his eyes. Defend your existence as if the survival of the world depended on it. For it very well might. Just as suddenly as Itachi had invaded his personal space, he was back in the doorway. The blood red of the renegade's dojutsu had turned to onyx, and his unfrozen clone suddenly went on the offensive. Naruto realized belatedly that the genjutsu must have ended even as Itachi casually snapped the wrist of the first Kage Bunshin, ending its life with a jab to the chest. He sat stupefied as the two remaining clones leapt futilely into action. Less than a moment passed since the door opened, and we've been talking for 10 minutes. This guy, he's unbelievable. Memories of a blow to the head and a slashed throat pulled Naruto from his stupor as the smoke from the final clones dissipated. The Uchiha was unruffled, looking for all the world like nothing had happened since the door had opened. The only sign of strain was the conspicuous lack of Sharingan coupled with a slight tightness around his eyes. And Naruto realized that even 1 month before he wouldn't have noticed even that about his supposed ally. Despite his strides toward strength, despite how far he had distanced himself from his peers since graduation, despite everything, he was still nothing to shinobi of Itachi's caliber. Less than nothing, his mind supplied. And for the first time since the night of the massacre, Naruto realized the true magnitude of his situation. Orochimaru had spoken the truth. Talent and potential alone would leave him dead against the likes of Itachi and the Akatsuki. A cold sweat broke out along the back of his neck, and it had nothing to do with the monstrous, shark-like man who had just stepped behind Itachi. Now, Itachi-san, I expected a bit more of a fight from this one. All those stories, I was looking forward to giving Samahata a nice lunch. The blue man grinned, baring pointed teeth as he reached back and grasped the handle of massive weapon wrapped in bandages. Should I cut off a couple limbs for good measure? The statement forcibly yanked Naruto back to the present. Itachi said nothing, continuing to gaze at Naruto impassively as the fatigue around his eyes slowly regressed. The blonde didn't have time to contemplate his next move before the wall directly to Itachi's left exploded inward and the sound of 1,000 screaming birds nearly deafened him. His eyes widened as Sasuke, and what the fuck was he doing here, darted through the opening, his hand filled with blue lightning and aimed at Itachi's chest. The elder brother didn't even flinch, and Naruto formed a cross-shaped seal as he realized what was about to happen. He narrowed his eyes in concentration, manipulating his chakra into a Kage Bunshin that formed across the room. Doing the same to his brother as he had done to Naruto earlier, Itachi effortlessly redirected the no-doubt lethal technique to the side. A sharp crack ended the jutsu as Sasuke's wrist broke, and the younger Uchiha cried out in sudden pain as the renegade turned his momentum into a throw. The clone used its body to cushion Sasuke's impact against the opposing wall, bursting into smoke that Naruto used as cover for a body flicker to appear behind his friend. Not that I'm unhappy to see you, but what are you doing here? Naruto hissed. Uchiha Itachi, Sasuke grunted, directed more at his brother than at the blonde behind him. Naruto's eyes narrowed as black flames began to rapidly spread across Sasuke's neck and the air became heavy with malice. Hello, Sasuke, Itachi said, calm as ever in the face of his younger brother's palpable rage. It was foolish of you to come here today. I can see it in your eyes, your hate is not strong enough to defeat me. Sasuke's chakra ignited into blue lightning tinged with black as his voice became low and guttural. Naruto hastily stepped back, away from the jutsu's fallout as Sasuke bit out, I'll show you just how strong my hate is, Itachi. The massive blue man stepped forward, bandaged weapon still strapped to his back. Not to interrupt the touching family reunion, Itachi-san, but you were the one who said we have a time limit. The renegade Uchiha's eyes narrowed for a moment. Indeed. I'll deal with my foolish brother. Apprehend Naru. The missing nin stopped abruptly, tensing as his partner unlatched his weapon and swung it at the wall that separated the room from the hallway. The sound of chakra grinding upon itself greeted Naruto's ears a moment before the wall blew inward, a Rasengan meeting the mysterious blade with a high-pitched whine. Behind it, Jiraiya grinned savagely. Sorry to crash this little shindig, but I just couldn't stay away. The Rasengan suddenly expanded to twice its original size before exploding in a thunderclap of blinding light. Naruto's eyes widened against the blast, just as he felt someone grab him by the back of the collar. His vision blurred, and he found himself halfway down the hallway outside the now-destroyed room. Sasuke was beside him, lightning jutsu aborted in the confusion, and Jiraiya stood in front of them protectively. You alright, kiddo? The sand nin asked over his shoulder as the smoke cleared to reveal the two missing nin, mostly unharmed save for the bandages on the blue man's weapon having burned off. Naruto snorted. Never better. What took you so long? I never leave a woman unsatisfied. I work fast but not that fast, Jiraiya said, a grin in his voice. Distantly, Naruto marveled at how at ease he was in such a perilous situation. He glanced left to see Sasuke still glaring daggers at his brother, though the mysterious black flames had receded from his skin. As for these two, Jiraiya began, his full attention on the missing nin. Uchiha Itachi and Hoshigaki Kisame. I had wondered if the rumors were true. So you are after the containers, huh? The blue man, Kisame, grinned as Itachi surveyed the Sannin. You are the source behind Kakashi's knowledge, the Uchiha stated. Got it in one, kid. Your organization is really something else, what with high-profile scum like you guys being members. Jiraiya turned slightly to glance backwards. Get to a safe distance with you, friend, Naruto. I'll deal with these guys. Don't! Sasuke burst out. Itachi is mine to kill. The Sannin regarded the young Uchiha impassively. Revenge, eh? Can't say you don't deserve it, but these guys are a bit out of your league at the moment, kid. Kisame brought his scaly sword to bear. That's big talk, old man. I wasn't all that impressed with the other one of you Sannin that I met a couple years back. Naruto stared as Jiraiya actually chuckled. Met Orochi-chan, did you? Surprised he didn't feed you to one of his snakes, what with manners like yours. He might be a bastard, but he and I were kicking trash like you around for years before you were born. Enough of this, Itachi cut in. Kisame, this isn't a fight we want today. Let's go. The blue man grimaced but holstered his weapon all the same. One of these days, Itachi-san. Kisame grunted, before turning and sprinting after his partner down the hallway. Oh no you don't. Jiraiya exclaimed, speeding through seals and slamming his palms to the floor. Fleshy pink tissue burst from the walls with a squelch, immediately slowing the fleeing shinobi. A Rasengan formed in his hand in an instant. You guys are already in the belly of the beast. He tore after them in a burst of speed that Naruto hadn't thought the large man capable of, only to stop short as the air inside the walls suddenly spiked in temperature. Pitch-black flame burst from nowhere in front of Itachi, burning a hole 10 feet wide in the fleshy walls in an instant. The Nukenin wasted no time powering through the opening and into the open air. Jiraiya reached the opening a moment later but halted, surveying the still burning black flames with something akin to morbid curiosity. Well, I'll be damned. He muttered, sparing the sprawling town that the Nukenin had disappeared into one last glance. Naruto and Sasuke hurried to his side. You're not going after them, the blonde asked, sending a sidelong glance at his friend. Sasuke was still quivering with rage, but was breathing heavily and cradling his broken wrist gingerly. He wouldn't be attempting anything else. Wouldn't do much good, now would it, brat, Jiraiya said absently, pulling a jar from nowhere and scooping up some of the black flames. I'd chase them, we'd fight some and maybe I'd get one of them, maybe they'd get me. He surveyed the flames for a moment more before the jar disappeared back to wherever he'd pulled it from. Naruto stood in wonderment at how easily he broached the topic of his own death, not happy with the possibility for sure, but neither did he seem particularly concerned. What's that like, he wondered. In any event, we have a mission to complete and a Hokage to find, the Sannin said with some of his usual cheer before he noticed Sasuke. Oh, he started, face falling into contemplation. You weren't supposed to know about this, super secret mission and all that, I'm sure you won't tell anyone. Sasuke blinked and nodded in bewilderment, shooting Naruto a look filled with confusion. The blonde just shrugged, long since used to his bizarre sensei's antics. Good, Jiraiya said, clapping his hands. Now, we should probably get that wrist of yours taken care of. I'm not much of a healer myself, and we can't turn back to Konoha at this point. Well, I guess it's a good thing backup should be here in about 3, 2. Dynamic entry was all the warning they had before Jiraiya casually dropped to a knee and a leotard-clad man hurtled through the empty space his head had just occupied. Naruto flattened himself on the ground, just barely avoiding a heel to the face as the man's momentum carried him overhead. Just in time to be late to the fight, he heard Jiraiya mutter, uncharacteristically uncharitable before the man boomed, "Guy. You're just in time." Naruto rested his hand on his forehead to calm his spinning head. He doubted his day was even close to being over. The steady, rhythmic beat of his cane hitting the floor was as familiar as the backs of his hands at this point. It, like everything else, served its purpose. He had long since grown used to his appearance. Age was nothing more than a mark of experience, injuries were smokescreens to hide skill. Regret was unprofessional, and all things could be tools, one merely had to be a shrewd shinobi to use them properly. The rhythm halted as Danzo reached his familiar destination. A lone ANBU with a cat mask stood guard and let him pass without a word. The familiar small, windowless room greeted the elder as the door swung open, revealing a rectangular table in the middle, equidistant from all of the walls, and his company for what was likely the rest of the afternoon waiting for him. Danzo, Udatane Kohara greeted with a nod that he returned as he sat across from them without fanfare. Koharo, Hamura, he greeted in turn. They sat next to each other on the long end of the table, their usual seats, while Danzo sat alone. He didn't allow his eyes to wander to the head of the table, to the empty chair that was to be filled by the Hokage. His nostrils flared involuntarily and he quashed the grief that momentarily threatened to overwhelm him with an iron will. "It doesn't smell right in here," Hamura commented idly, and Danzo chastised himself for being so easily read. Hiruzen had always suffocated them with his damn pipe. Regret is unprofessional, he reminded himself. "To business then," Danzo said quietly, pushing thoughts of his greatest rival and oldest friend from his mind. "The threat assessment?" Koharo prompted, leaning forward. A swipe of blood and a slight application of chakra revealed 2 file folders, both marked as classified. Root's assessment of Orochimaru's capabilities leaves little room for doubt. "I won't bother reciting a full list of his transgressions. He has proven himself to be the greatest threat to Konoha's sovereignty since the Third War," Danzo proclaimed, opening the top one. "He is considered a level 1 threat." "Even after Hiruzen's seal?" Koharo asked. "Regardless of how injured he is in the aftermath of their battle." The bandaged elder shook his head in the affirmative. "Orochimaru successfully created a village of his own, turned an ally against us, orchestrated an attack on our village proper, and murdered our Kage. Left unchecked, we can assume he will continue working towards our eventual destruction. Putting aside the damage caused to the village, our reputation is in a quagmire. He must be dealt with. An attack that we successfully anticipated and turned to our advantage by routing the invading force," Hamura countered. "The reparations we'll receive from Suna will be more than enough to mitigate the damage that was caused by the Ichibi. Truly, other than Hiruzen's death, we are not as disadvantaged as you seem to think, Danzo. And one of the sitting Kage has not been assassinated since the Sandaime Kazekage, and the Night Aim Reikage before him. I need not remind you what happened in the aftermath of both of those deaths. We've no one to declare war on," Koharo stated, referencing both the Third and Second Great Shinobi Wars. "Our enemy is known, we have routed the invasion, and our ANBU are pursuing the leftover Odo forces through river country." Hamura interjected, "Our attention belongs in the north. Jiraiya's latest report on Kumogakure before the exams was indeed troubling." Danzo caught his outburst with patience developed over a lifetime, even as irritation bubbled to the surface. "The fastest way to stall Kumo's advance is to re-establish ourselves as the dominant power. On the continent, eliminating Orochimaru accomplishes this while possibly avoiding a war with Kumo in the next 5 years, a war we can scarcely afford at this time even with Suna's reparations, and a war that is looming ever closer given what we know of Iai's movements." The 2 elders opposite him shared a glance. "What exactly are you proposing?" Koharo asked. "Do not misunderstand, Danzo," Hamura said. "Eliminating Orochimaru is very much a priority. He is, unfortunately, one of the most powerful and elusive men on the continent and not to be handled lightly. The resources needed simply to find him could be better spent on preventative measures to guard against a preemptive strike from the north. Finding him is a difficult enough starting place. He's avoided our best scouts for years, even Jiraiya has difficulty pinning him down," Koharo concurred. "Never mind the skill needed to assassinate him." "I agree," Danzo said quickly, noting the surprise evident on his peers' faces before it was quickly masked. Loath as I am to admit it, he thought, allowing irritation to color his thoughts before quashing it with practiced ease. There is no efficient way to strike at Orochimaru in our current state. That does not mean that we should not take steps to neutralize him going forward, if not eliminate him entirely. And what, exactly, did you have in mind? Hamura asked. The bandaged elder pushed the first folder containing Root's threat assessment to the side, leaving a second, far thinner folder in its place. He blinked, an uncharacteristic moment of hesitation taking hold of him before he ruthlessly crushed it. It wasn't the first impossible task he would set upon a young shinobi's shoulders, and he doubted it would be the last. Opening it, Uzumaki Naruto's face stared back at him. How much of this do you already know, kid? Naruto twitched as Jiraiya's words penetrated the wind in his ears as they ran through another of Fire Country's expansive forests. The discussion of what exactly had happened in Shakuba Town had been summarily tabled while the Konoha Jonin, a Mato guy, had sped off to Konoha with the still-injured Sasuke in tow. The Uchiha had left without much protest, but Naruto had received a look that he knew spelled nothing but trouble for him upon his eventual return. How much of what, exactly, sensei? He asked wearily. There was no deliberate evasion in his voice, he honestly didn't quite know where to start. Can't fool these old eyes, the Sannin boasted from next to him, powering from branch to branch at a pace that Naruto had to push himself to match. You were off your game back in that hotel, but not nearly as much as a kid who just learned he's got a couple of S-class criminals after his head. There was no accusation in Jiraiya's tone, a fact that put Naruto more at ease than he thought he'd be. He tensed, expecting the same feeling of panic that had always greeted him whenever he had thought about the Akatsuki, the sound of blood pounding in his ears and the memory of Itachi's Sharingan whenever someone came close to finding out his greatest secret. Only this time there was nothing. Blinking in confusion, he turned to Jiraiya who was looking at him expectantly out of the corner of his eye. The night of the massacre. He, Itachi, showed up at my apartment. Naruto didn't need to turn his head to know Jiraiya's attention was riveted on him. No proverbial weight was lifted from his shoulders when he said it, such was the magnitude of his task. But Jiraiya had certainly proven himself to be more than capable as both a shinobi and a sensei. If anyone could help him now, even as the clock kept ticking until Akatsuki made their next move, it would be him. So Naruto told him. From Itachi's proclamation to his mastery of the henge, from his first fight with Sasuke to the ill-fated mission to Wave. The Toad Sannin was silent for a few minutes after Naruto finished his tale, leaving Naruto to his thoughts. He had never told anyone of the night of the massacre. Originally, he had wanted to approach the Sandaime. He contained a wince at the thought of the now-deceased old man, but had refrained. Itachi himself had said that Sarutobi wouldn't be able to protect him forever, and he had figured that he might as well get used to fending for himself if he'd have to do it anyway. It rarely came up, after that initial reasoning. What few people did question his sudden passion for excellence were easily assuaged by the fact that a Hokage wannabe would naturally need to be skilled. And it's not like anyone would have believed the truth of the matter regardless. But now, he finally had a teacher that was taking him seriously. Better yet, one of the Sannin. He still had no clue why exactly Jiraiya had singled him out, though it very well could have had to do with his father, but he was far from complaining. The Toad Sage had put enough trepidation into two Akatsuki members on his own to send them packing. Not being upfront with the man at this point would have just been stupid, on his part. Hell of a story, kiddo, Jiraiya said, breaking his momentary reverie. I won't bother asking why you didn't bother to tell anyone cause, well, he trailed off with a rueful chuckle. You believe me, then? Even you would have come up with a better lie than that, Gaki, the Sannin boomed, laughing heartily now. Naruto, quelling his irritation with the older Nin, wondered absently at the man's ability to seemingly take everything in stride. Even so, all that said, doesn't really change much, does it? Jiraiya cut him off before he could question. I've been tracking these guys for a long time, ever since I got wind of Orotin being a member round about 10 years ago. Knew they'd be after you sooner or later, just had to wait till enough of my own problems had been sorted to work with you myself. Naruto blinked, mystified but not entirely surprised even as a small smile cracked his lips. It was even slightly comforting knowing that something bigger had been in the works for his training. As alone as his fight always seemed, he wasn't. Not truly, at least. Anyway, considering I'd always planned to whip you into something halfway decent, this whole Itachi shtick doesn't change much at all. Though their first move means we've gotta get moving, the Sannin murmured. Sensei? Jiraiya turned to him, face set in stone. Real training starts now, kiddo. Even if Itachi doesn't want you dead, there's no telling if he's gonna be the one after you all the time, and we can't take the chance that I'll always be around to bail your ass out of the fire when the bad guys come knocking." The blonde couldn't help the grin that split his lips at Jiraiya's proclamation. "Perfect," he crowed mentally. The large man halted on a branch mid-stride, and Naruto mimicked him quickly, eager for whatever tidbit of knowledge was about to be bestowed upon him. "We're about 3 hours travel away from Tanzakugai," the white-haired man said. "Your job, from now until we reach it, is to hide from me." "Huh. It will be if you actually can hide from me for a decent amount of time, Gaki." Naruto quirked an eyebrow. "And a decent amount of time is?" Jiraiya stroked an imaginary beard on his chin in mock thought. "Let's say 3 minutes to start. You manage that, we up it to 5. And so on." "That's it?" Naruto thought incredulously. "TCH, fine by me," he said, grinning. Without prompting, he shot off into the trees in a burst of raw speed sans chakra. Leaving an easily traceable chakra signature by using Shunshin was a rookie mistake, and Naruto was no rookie when it came to hiding from experienced shinobi. He'd been avoiding patrols in order to go train for years, after all. Coming to a halt after a 30-second sprint, he formed a cross-shaped seal and 3 clones popped into existence. The 4 Narutos formed a tiger seal and the Maisegakure took hold before all split off into different directions. The original ducked down to ground level and behind a small grouping of shrubbery, being extra careful not to disturb the leaves as he settled in. 39 seconds since I left, he counted off in his head. The decoys would hopefully be enough to shake the footprints he had undoubtedly left, despite his best intentions. And his use of the Maisegakure no Jutsu had improved since before the prelim. "Miss me, kid?" Jiraiya whispered into his ear, causing Naruto to leap nearly a foot in the air with an undignified yelp. How Naruto nearly shrieked before the combined memories of his 3 clones simultaneously being dispelled smacked him in the skull, causing him to wince in pain. "Not gonna lie to you, Gaki, 40 seconds is more than I expected from you at this point," Jiraiya said, clapping the newly incredulous Chunin on the shoulder. 40 seconds is still ass though. We've got some work to do on your stealth skills. That Maisegakure technique you've got going ain't bad, but I can still see you distorting the air every time you take a breath." Naruto, who approximately 45 seconds ago had thought his stealth skills were at least a few cuts above ass, couldn't refrain from sulking. "And I assume you have a plan for all this, sensei?" "Course I do." Jiraiya's grip suddenly became vice-like before he vaulted both of them back into the branches. "Landing without a sound," he said, suddenly serious once more, "you've got no chance fighting against the kind of shinobi Akatsuki can send your way right now, and you won't for a while just yet, even with me teaching you. Which means your best bet right now is being able to at least avoid and outrun them if shit gets real." Naruto carefully bit down on his pride. He was no stranger to the notion of Akatsuki being able to utterly obliterate him. Itachi had made that abundantly clear. "Yes, sensei," he said, his tone less than enthused regardless of the rationality behind the plan. "Buck up, Gaki," Jiraiya crowed. "I know a thing about speed and stealth. Ever heard of the Yan name? He was pretty quick and he didn't get that way on his own." The Sannin paused, considering, before, well, not entirely on his own, he amended. Naruto couldn't help but snort at the offhand mention of his father's legendary speed, his mood lightning. By all rights, Namake's Minato had been the fastest man in the world when he died, and he hadn't been far from it before he invented his lethal Hiraishin no Jutsu. "But first," Jiraiya said once more as he led Naruto off into the canopy towards their destination, "let me tell you about a guy by the name of Mew. You probably know of him by his title, named Sachikage. Got to meet him one time, Sarutobi-sensei hated the bastard. Not as much as his successor of course, but I digress. // Finding a member of the legendary 3 had promised to be a harrowing endeavor. They were the Sandame's students, each respected as a Kage-level ninja in their own right. If they didn't want to be found, they wouldn't be. According to Jiraiya, Orochimaru had more than proven that point in the years that he had tracked him across the elemental nations. It was fortuitous for their mission, then, that Tsunade wasn't trying to hide. Naruto assumed she wasn't, at least. What else could explain her contentedly playing poker in the middle of a crowded casino floor with nary genjutsu to conceal her well-known features? Although there was clearly an illusion of some sort, there was no other explanation for how she looked exactly the same as the academy textbooks had shown her in photos. Those photos had been taken at the end of the Second Shinobi World War. Not even the most skilled shinobi could defeat Father Time. Naruto had paused alongside Jiraiya when they had entered the casino in Tanzakugai at seeing the Toad Sanin's teammate clearly in the open. "What's your plan, sensei?" he asked. Jiraiya had told him that they were looking for Tsunade to be the next Hokage, but hadn't actually explained how they would be going about getting her to come back with them. From what little Naruto knew about Tsunade, she had been outside of the village for some time. If she hadn't come back for her sensei's funeral, how were they to convince her to return? Although Jiraiya hadn't attended the Sandame's funeral either. Neither did I, the blonde mused with a twinge of guilt. He had damn near jumped at the opportunity to leave when the older man had kicked his door in and declared that he aching him on a mission that would very conveniently have them outside the village during the massive ceremony. "We're gonna talk to her, kiddo," Jiraiya said, as if Naruto was the dumbest person in the world for asking. "Come on. She should be losing by now, which means she'll be on her way out sooner rather than later." "Losing?" Naruto questioned. "She's a kunoichi. Shouldn't she be able to wipe the floor with these guys?" He knew that any overt jutsu was banned from gambling halls and casinos, a rule strictly enforced by shinobi, usually jonin, hired by casino managers to keep people in line. Even so, Tsunade was far more skilled than even the elite shinobi wealthy casinos could afford to hire. Simple sleight of hand augmented by a subtle genjutsu would be all it would take to make her a winner in most cases. Jiraiya chuckled lowly as they moved onto the casino floor. "You'd think, wouldn't you? Tsunade's always been a by-the-book gambler, though. Unfortunately, because she refuses to cheat, she relies solely on her skill at cards. And how do I phrase this, well, she's god-awful, legitimately terrible. And that bad luck of hers certainly doesn't help," the Toad Sanin said. "It's gotten to the point that she's earned herself a nickname, the legendary sucker." Naruto blinked and looked up into Jiraiya's face, surprised to not hear even a hint of his sensei's familiar lecherous tone present. "He's actually serious about that nickname. We want her in charge of the village's finances?" he asked dubiously as they neared the table in question. A young woman with dark hair and a loose-fitting purple dress sitting behind Tsunade had noticed their approach but said nothing, contenting herself with watching them near. A small pig in her arms squirmed. "Tsunade only gambles with her own money, kiddo, don't you worry. Isn't that right, Hein?" Jiraiya addressed the back of his old teammate's head as they stopped behind the table. "I'm not sure why I bothered to hope you were in town on some other business," their quarry spoke in a voice that Naruto could only describe as husky. It was lower than most female voices Naruto had heard, and not simply due to the obvious annoyance that laced it. "Bet, 50,000, she told the dealer, tossing a pile of chips into the pot that made Naruto's eyes bulge. Jiraiya laughed lightly. "Not slipping in your old age, I see. And here I thought you wouldn't see us coming. TCH. I saw you at the inn where you checked in today, with the attendant you hit on, 4 blocks from here. I saw you before you even got up this morning." The river card was drawn and Tsunade flipped her 2 cards over casually and turned to face the interlopers fully. "What do you want, Jiraiya?" she asked before catching sight of Naruto. Her eyes narrowed and her brow wrinkled around a small diamond on her forehead, but she said nothing to the blonde. "I was going to offer to take you and Shizen-chan out to dinner, but it looks like you're the one who should be treating," Jiraiya said in a careful tone that confused Naruto even as Tsunade whirled around to see the dealer depositing an extremely large amount of chips in front of her. "Your winnings, Tsunade-sama," he said blandly. The Sannin, for her part, simply looked at the chips in askance for a moment before rising abruptly. "Shizen, we're leaving," was all she said as she turned from the table and began striding out of the casino. "Yes, Tsunade-sama," the dark-haired woman said, deftly sweeping the chips into a small bag with one hand and rising to follow the older woman. The pig was still tightly clutched. Jiraiya fell into step with the woman, named Shizun, apparently, and Naruto hurried to keep up. "You've grown up since I last saw you, Shizun-chan," he commented lightly. "How long has it been?" "Over 15 years, Jiraiya-sama," Shizun said as they exited the casino into the busy streets of Tanzakugai. Tsunade was still leading the way, powering through the crowd gracelessly. "What is your business with Tsunade-sama? She's been very agitated these past 2 days. And winning now won't help. My cute student and I have a few questions for her, is all," the older man stated, causing Naruto to bristle from behind them. "I resent the term cute," he piped, causing Shizun to giggle and shoot him a smile over her shoulder. Now, Naruto-chan. I thought we worked on your manners," Jiraiya chided with all of the exasperation of a beleaguered parent scolding their child. "I'll show you manners, you old perv," the blonde mumbled petulantly, doing his best not to rise to the man's bait. Any reply from the Sannin was cut off as they were led into a small restaurant off the main drag. Ignoring the host at the door, Tsunade simply walked to the back and dropped into a circular booth. The 3 others, plus Pig, followed her lead, with Jiraiya muttering something to the stunned host that elicited a vigorous nod and the man hurrying off. A bottle of sake and 3 glasses were set down less than 5 seconds after Jiraiya took a seat. "What the hell do you want, Jiraiya?" Tsunade asked harshly as the liquor was placed on the table. Her eyes were roiling with an emotion that Naruto couldn't truly identify but could guess at. She looked panicked. But that makes no sense, he thought, knowing to keep silent and let his sensei do the talking here. Jiraiya, for his part, simply poured out 2 cups of the steaming liquor and sat one in front of his teammate. Raising his own cup he said, to Sarutobi-sensei. Naruto felt his eyes prick slightly at the immediate thought of the old man, and he cast his eyes downward. Tsunade stiffened noticeably at the toast. Her eyes clouded over with another unidentifiable emotion before she picked up her own cup. To Sarutobi-sensei, she whispered, and drank the rice wine. "News travels fast, I see. Didn't know you were still in contact with people in the village," Jiraiya said as he poured another 2 cups. "Would you like some, Shizun-chan?" The dark-haired woman shook her head, opting to favor her master with a closed look. "I have my sources," Tsunade responded, taking a second cup of sake. "You still haven't answered me," she accused, though the heat had gone out of her voice. Jiraiya cut right to the chase. "We need a new Hokage," he said. "You were always the most organized of the 3 of us, and the best at dealing with all the clans. You're the last of the Senju and renowned across the continent, a face that would let the world know that Konoha is still strong." The blonde woman blinked, turned her eyes to the sake still in her cup, and brought them up to meet Jiraiya's steady gaze again. She barked a laugh that rapidly devolved into a fit. "You must be joking," she managed to get out around her laughter that was rapidly escalating in volume and decreasing in rationality. Jiraiya said nothing as she laughed hysterically to herself, content to sip his sake and stare at his teammate. Naruto, confused, tried to catch his gaze only to give up after a minute and glance back and forth between a steely-eyed Shizun and the hysterical Tsunade. "You always were an idiot, Jiraiya," she began after her laughter had abated a minute later. There wasn't a trace of mirth in her gaze as she regarded her teammate. "But this is impressive, even by your lofty standards of stupidity," she bit out. "I hope those bastard elders put you up to this, because you should know better." Naruto felt his eyes narrow as his hackles rose, even as Jiraiya looked unperturbed by the vitriol. "They told me you were the best choice for the seat and I agreed with them." Tsunade sneered. "Then you're just an ass, coming here for this. I'm not going back to that place. There's nothing left for me there." The Toad Sannin sighed. "I know why you left, Haim, and I know it hurts, but there's so much good that you could do in Konoha," Jiraiya implored, voice quiet. "Think of the medical corps. You could finally do the work that you always dreamed of. You could make it so that others don't have to go through what you did with." "Don't you dare say their names," the slug Sannin whispered violently. "Never thought you'd resort to base manipulation. Don't sit there and talk like you understand what I've been through." "Don't I though," her teammate responded softly, and Naruto suddenly got the feeling that he was intruding on a conversation that was far too personal. Shizen looked similarly uncomfortable across the table. Their respective sensei didn't seem to remember that they were there, however. My friends are all dead, my students the same, Orochimaru killed sensei, and you left too. Tsunade averted her gaze at Jiraiya's words. The genius, the princess, and the dead last. Somehow you ended up the best of us, didn't you? She shook her head. Who's the runt? Jiraiya shifted his gaze to Naruto, his lips quirking upward at the abrupt change in subject. Who, this? Why, it's my newest apprentice. Introduce yourself, Gaki. Naruto blinked at the apparent dropping of the reason they were there in the first place, but didn't bother to question. Given the intensely personal turn the conversation had taken, it was likely that the two old teammates would be continuing the discussion privately. As curious as he was to learn more about both legendary shinobi, he didn't want to pry into a place where he wasn't wanted. Uzumaki Naruto, he said. A pleasure to meet you, Tsunade-sama. How's that for manners? The older woman cocked her head to the side, considering him. Bit of a stuck-up little runt, isn't he? She asked rhetorically. Naruto felt his eye twitch, all thoughts of manners fleeing from his mind. This bitch, are all of the Sannin total dicks? He wondered. But I wasn't expecting that name, Tsunade was continuing. Uzumaki whom? Looks an awful lot like your last apprentice, Jiraiya. The lingering implication wasn't lost on him, though Naruto suspected that if he wasn't already aware of his heritage it might have gone over his head. Doubt he's as talented, though. The young blonde let the dig pass and instead favored his sensei with a searching look. The Sannin, for his part, had a neutral look on his face. He had never gone over his knowledge of his parents with the man, there had always been issues more important than discussing dead people. But now isn't the time, he thought. Airing what was likely a classified secret during a meeting that was already tense, never mind the source of his knowledge, didn't seem to be the better part of valor. I doubt anyone can really measure up to the Yondaime, he finally said, plastering a bland smile on his face for the older woman. TCH. From what I hear he's practically a saint back in Konoha these days. What with that whole Kyuubi business, she said, never taking her eyes from Naruto. The younger blonde felt his earlier anger bubble up once again. Tsunade had to know that the Yondaime's death was a reasonably sore subject with Jiraiya, even after 13 years. It also raised the question of her knowledge of his Jinchuriki status. She certainly seemed focused on him rather intently. A thought struck him, underneath. Is she deliberately testing to see how much information I know about myself? Or is she trying to create tension between me and Sensei with information that I shouldn't know? He couldn't guess at her motives. For all he knew, it could be anything from overt manipulation to simple information gathering. Still, must be tough having to be compared to a guy like that all the time, Tsunade finished, still staring at him. Or she could just be a bitch, Naruto concluded. Unbidden, Asuma's words from the mission to Wave Country came back to him. Stop comparing yourself to everyone else. If there's anything my experience has taught me, Naruto, it's that the only way to get stronger is to focus on yourself, and what you need to get where you want to go. I'm just focused on me, Tsunade-sama, he demurred. Comparing myself to Namake's Minato wouldn't make much sense, our lives are too different. And maybe he was more talented than me too, can't change that either. The grin that split his lips was genuine. But I'm gonna be just as strong as he was someday. Stronger too. Believe it. Jiraiya laid a hand on his shoulder, and Naruto looked up to see a proud expression gracing the man's weathered face. Shizen was staring at him too, a bit wide-eyed at his casual proclamation. Tsunade had leaned back into the booth as he spoke, her eyes calculating. Bold words from a runt. You want to be Hokage like him too, don't you? Naruto couldn't help the snort that immediately burst forth. Hokage? Nah. Too much work behind a desk for me. A perfectly manicured eyebrow rose. Huh. Guess you might be smarter than his last apprentice after all. / Mind if I join you? Naruto opened his eyes to behold his new companion. Tsunade was stretched out on the concrete roof of the hotel languidly, barefoot and with a bottle of sake in her hand. Blinking, the blonde Chunin realized that it was nighttime. "I'd been up here for a while," he realized. "Looks like you already have," he remarked, not perturbed by her sudden appearance in the slightest. One of his sentry clones had dispelled moments earlier, alerting him to her coming his way. Inwardly, he realized that she must not have cared to try to sneak up on him. The rest of the meal had been somewhat uneventful, with little more about Naruto said after Tsunade's initial probing. Immediately after, the two old teammates had disappeared to parts unknown, presumably to reminisce and discuss Konoha's proposition. Naruto had been left with Shizen and her pig, Tonton, and had gone back to his and Jiraiya's hotel. After a few choice words to the desk attendant, Tsunade's apprentice had upgraded their room to a large, comfortable suite which all four were apparently going to share. The blonde didn't bother to complain or even give the matter much thought. It wasn't his money being spent, and if it got Konoha a new Hokage sooner, then all the better. Sometime later, after having claimed his spot in the room, Naruto made his way to the roof to stargaze, meditate, and process what he knew about the final Sannin to make his acquaintance, not necessarily in that order. Tsunade had proven to be an enigma. He knew a bit about her history from the academy and his personal digging on the Sannin, both after Orochimaru had revealed himself in the Chunin exams and when Jiraiya had taken him on as a student. Little in his research could help him guess at what exactly was driving the legendary woman, however. The Shodai's granddaughter, the Sannin student, a prodigious medicnine who had left her mark on two of the three shinobi world wars. Not much else was said. Naruto figured it was classified above his pay grade. "Suppose I have," the older woman murmured. "You don't look surprised to see me, kid. Thought I was quieter than that." Naruto just shrugged, electing to keep silent about his clones. They were all practicing the Maisegekure while serving as his lookouts, which meant that either they had managed a breakthrough that allowed them to escape Tsunade's notice, she wasn't paying attention, or she was probing like he suspected she had been at lunch. Betting on the last one, he thought with mild irritation. Thinking underneath the underneath was both annoying as fuck and more mentally taxing than he liked to admit. "You're also drunk," he said, taking note of a slight red hue tinging her youthful face. Tsunade snorted inelegantly. "TCH, hardly. When I'm drunk, you'll know about it, kid. I'll make note of that." The Sannin tilted her head to regard him in the early moonlight. Her eyes, Naruto realized, were as sharp as ever despite her rosy cheeks, and her stare pinned him in place. Distantly, he mused that all three Sannin had the ability to effortlessly leave him off kilter, Orochimaru's cold menace, Jiraiya's masked shrewdness, and now Tsunade's penetrating stares that made it feel like he was being dissected. She was seemingly content to stay silent, and he couldn't help but squirm as her eyes bored into him as the seconds ticked by. Her eyes were a honeyed brown, he noted, with little flecks of gold that he was certain would gleam in the proper light. Unbidden, his eyes were drawn slowly downward to the soft curve of her neckline as her pale skin seemed to glow in the early moonlight. Further down his gaze slid, from her neckline to her exposed cleavage, and he felt himself lean forward ever so slightly. Naruto jerked his head back with a snap, disrupting the internal flow of his chakra with a gasp. "Genjutsu." Across from him, Tsunade returned her gaze to the night sky without a word. This woman, the Sannin, Naruto thought, they're unreal. He wasn't the best when it came to genjutsu, and likely never would be, but he knew the signs of one, how to detect them, and how to dispel them quickly. Leno and Asuma had made sure of that. And yet Tsunade had waltzed up and ensnared him for nearly a minute without so much as a hand seal. She isn't even known for her genjutsu. He shook himself, anger at himself for being easy prey clawing at his thoughts. Another test, he growled hoarsely. He recognized his sensei's influence when he saw it. Tsunade shrugged. "Jiraiya asked me for a favor." Naruto snorted and shook his head. "Course he did," he muttered under his breath. "That the only one he asked you for," he snarked, leveling a raised brow at the Sannin. "Ha! The old perv wouldn't dare if he knew what was good for him." The blonde woman chuckled to herself. "Though I suppose he doesn't, now does he?" Naruto turned his eyes skyward as his companion trailed off. It would be just like Jiraiya to test his capacity to handle subtle genjutsu by sending a gorgeous woman to distract him. The man was apparently the master of devious training methods. Their stealth game of cat and mouse on the way into Tanzakugai was just one example. One more thing to work on. He was certainly grateful that his sensei was clearly taking his training seriously, frustrating as it was at times. Jiraiya knew what he was up against better than most, having tracked Akatsuki for a few years back when Orochimaru had been a member. And he certainly had a proven track record of powerful apprentices. The thought of the yondaime brought Naruto's musings to a halt. Blue eyes flickered over to Tsunade briefly, considering. Jiraiya had undoubtedly been talking to her for much of the day about their mission, but damn if he wasn't curious himself. "Why'd you leave?" he asked bluntly. He doubted his abilities at extracting information from people extended to legendary ninja. The honey-brown eyes were locked on his before he could blink, and the gaze was far less inviting than it had been the first time. "That's a pretty personal question, kid," she said quietly. "And you walked up here and put a genjutsu on me without prompting," Naruto thought. Beauty aside, he had no desire to have sexual thoughts about his sensei's teammate. She was old. "Just curious," he said instead. "You haven't been in the village for at least 15 years. Didn't think that was standard for future Kages." Tsunade snorted. "And who says I'm a future Kage?" The Chunin felt his brow furrow. "Well, I mean that's why we're here. Feel like your village asking you to come back and be Hokage isn't something that you can, well, ignore," he said, entirely confused. "TCH. Those elders can rot in hell for all I care. I'll tell you the same thing I told Jiraiya, kid. There's nothing left in Konoha for me. But you must ask yourself this, what allegiance does a man owe to a village that does not appreciate him? None." Orochimaru's words came to mind without prompting. Naruto grimaced at the thought of the traitor's words. It seemed the Sannin weren't all that different. In the end, Orochimaru defected, Tsunade left, and even Jiraiya spent minimal time in Konoha. What a team, he mused. "That's it, then?" he asked, intrigued. "I didn't think Jiraiya-sensei would let it go that quick." Tsunade shrugged in his periphery, taking a pull from her bottle. "I may give the pervert shit for being an idealist, but he knows a lost cause when he sees one." Naruto nodded, trying to quell the mix of confusion and irritation bubbling beneath the surface. "Just seems odd to me, you know. Your Gramps was the Shodai and your sensei was the Sandaime. Why wouldn't you follow in their footsteps?" "Being Hokage is a death sentence," Tsunade declared immediately, as if she didn't even have to think about it. "Anyone who wants that hat is a damn fool," she said, bitterness seeping through every word. Her eyes snapped to Naruto for the second time that night, pinning him once more. "But you know that already, don't you? All that talk about wanting to be better than the yondaime and even you don't want to Hokage." She shifted so that she faced the young blonde fully, and Naruto felt the full weight of her attention fall on him for the first time. "You joked about being behind a desk, but I could see it in your eyes," she continued. "You want to be Hokage as much as I do, so why bother asking?" Naruto shook himself. "They're also not asking me to take the job," he murmured. "That's kinda it, though. I don't know what happened to you, don't really want to either, but whatever it is, they know about it, and they're asking you anyway. The village wouldn't do that unless they really needed you." Tsunade barked a laugh. "You have no idea what they make you give, kid. They'll ask for your life, and that's fine, that's what you sign up for when you graduate, even though you don't know it. But then they ask for your friends' lives, and your families, until you're the only one left, and then they ask for more. That's what being Hokage is. And for your sacrifice, you get your face carved in stone," she concluded, raising her sake in a mocking toast. "Most don't even get that much," she whispered into the night. Naruto leaned back, considering the Sannin's words. It wasn't much more than he had already considered himself, back when he learned of his parentage from the Kyuubi. It took a certain kind of person to seal a demon into your newborn son, knowing the likely consequences, even among shinobi, who had loyalty bred into them from their first academy lecture. That was above and beyond. But that's who the Hokage were. The Shodai had died defending his troops from Salamander Hanzo's first, unexpected offensive at the outset of the First Great War. The Night-Aim had fallen to Kumogakure's Kinkaku force, sacrificing himself so that his team could pass word of Kumo's treachery on. The Sandaime sacrificed his soul to stop Orochimaru. And his father? A small, sardonic smile split his lips at the thought. I used to want to be Hokage, he said quietly. The villagers hate me because of the Kyuubi, so I figured that if I became Hokage then they'd have no choice but to love me. But that's not what being Hokage is about. Naruto shook his head. I studied them, you know? Every scrap of information I could get my hands on. Especially the Yondaime, he said. He turned his eyes skyward, knowing that he had Tsunade's undivided attention. He sacrificed his soul and his life to stop the Kyuubi. He's the village's greatest hero, and they don't even know what he gave up, not really. Honestly, Naruto didn't quite know what he thought of Namake's Minato most days. As much as he hated what his father had done to him, he couldn't help but feel an inkling of pride for the man. He turned back to the Sannin to find her wide eyes locked on him and roiling with an emotion he couldn't name. The Chunin inclined his head slightly. To be Hokage is to be the least selfish person in the village, he declared softly. Mentally, he had put himself in his father's shoes many times. Would he have been able to sacrifice not only himself, but his only child for the betterment of the village? The village has to come first, no matter what. And I don't know if I can do that. That's why I don't want to be Hokage, he told Tsunade. The older woman regarded him carefully for nearly a minute, a glint in her eye that hadn't been present before. Naruto held her gaze with ease, daring her to challenge his declaration. She nodded after a while, turning to stare out into the night, presumably lost in her musings. The younger blonde settled himself after a few minutes, reflecting. She hadn't reacted over much to his hinted knowledge of his parentage. Which either meant she had known or suspected from the moment they had met. Jiraiya probably confirmed it to her, he deduced. Jiraiya was right, Tsunade said without prompting, breaking him from his musings. The young blonde turned to her expectantly. You are smarter than you look. Naruto felt his eye twitch, but couldn't help the laughing snort that escaped him. Beside him, Tsunade smiled, settling in to watch the stars once more.
That's it for today. Remember to show your support to the creator of this story if you enjoyed it. If you would like more parts of the story to be uploaded, leave a comment and subscribe to get notified when the story continues. Bye-bye for now, and I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your day.